This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the Eau Claire Area School Board. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Eau Claire School Board. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here this evening. Tonight's meeting will also be broadcast on Charter Channel 994, WRFP 101.9 FM radio, and online at valleymediaworks.org and ecsd.us. Secretary Iverson, are we in compliance with open meeting law notification?
Yes, we are.
Okay, could we have a roll call, please, for verification of quorum?
Commissioner Bika.
Here.
Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle.
I'm here.
Commissioner Harder.
Here.
Commissioner Klinkhammer. Commissioner Luganville.
Here.
Commissioner Torres.
Here.
And Commissioner Vu.
Here.
All right, so there's 6 of us here this evening. That brings us then to our next item, which is the public forum. So citizens will have up to 4 minutes to address the board. The board will not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor any person connected with the school system. There will be a timer up on the screen, and the microphone is on, so just leave that on. And once you get up, once I've called your name, just state your name and address, please. So first is Wendy Sue Johnson.
Hi,
Hello.
I'm Wendy Sue Johnson, and I live at 507 Indian Hills Drive. It's an Eau Claire address. And I sent you an email earlier today, so if you haven't seen it, I know it got through because Aaron responded. But feel free to go and look at it. I first of all shared the letter to the editor that I had sent a couple weeks ago when you're first talking about accepting this large gift that you're going to be discussing later tonight. Of course, I referenced a couple of policies. You know that according to your gift policy, you don't have to accept gifts from the community. You have a naming rights policy in place since 2009 that allows you to consider naming rights with substantial gifts. And the idea back then, like now, you're looking for new sources of revenue. If somebody wanted to pay for something that the district needed, you could encourage them to do that by putting a name on it to recognize that. And then, of course, the equity policy, which I think is really important as you consider which gifts to accept or not, whether they're in, $1.2 million to build a field, or whether it's an ice skating sharpener or band instruments. You need to consider the equity of accepting gifts that go to one particular school or program and not others. So after sending the email, I went looking. I had to do a little bit of digging for your 5-year capital budget or plan. And the most recent one I could find was 2017-2018, when I was on the board and on the Demographics and Facilities Committee. We got this document several times a year, updated as needed. And Patty was able to find for me one of the short sheets that you often get as well that shows 1920 5-year capital plan and then some projections for the next 2 years. So that if you need to know where that is, Patty would have to tell you where. But a little concerned that the only or the most recent one would be for 17-18, not 18-19 or 19-20 even, because this document, what it does, there's a summary sheet, and then for every single building in the district, it lays out the identified needs. And so looking at it, I printed just north of Memorial. I don't see anywhere in here where fields, tracks, or anything are identified as the needs that you've even past 5 years your buildings people have identified as a need. The closest thing I could find was on the very last page. There's something called other requests, which I presume the staff didn't identify as priorities. There was a 440-seat permanent bleachers at Memorial's track and field for $60,000, but that didn't even make it, into the greater document. So as you're considering how to use that very limited $1.6 million, which you typically spend on capital improvements, to address the $66 million in identified needs at least 2 years ago, I would hope that you wouldn't spend money that is needed to repave and replace roofs and do other things that your staff has identified as being necessary for the operation of the district. Even accounting for the $13 million in projects from the referendum, that means you still have got over $50 million of identified capital needs that you need to address. So while it's hard to turn down money, perhaps you can encourage the philanthropy to be redirected to something you've actually identified as a need and do it equitably for all students in the district. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Mackenzie Gabler.
Mackenzie Gabler, 1326 Russ Street, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, 54701. In reviewing the school board committee's policy 185 on page 11, it identifies in the first paragraph the 5 standing committees. And with the proposed changes, it states each standing committee shall also take minutes of meetings and that committees shall comply with open meetings law. My question is, does this mean the minutes from the standing committees, are they available to the public? Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kristen Nelson. Please turn your microphone on.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Kristen Nelson, 343 Bartlett Court. Good evening. I have an incoming kindergartner this fall. We went to the district office to enroll him, and he couldn't be more excited to start school. The staff has been friendly, helpful, and accommodating. I do have some concerns, however, as he begins school in an era where vaccine-preventable diseases are reemerging. You see, my son has asthma, and despite the perception that because asthma is common, it must not be serious, this couldn't be further from the truth. Asthma is a serious health risk. It inhibits my child's ability to breathe. Watching your child gasp for air is a very scary experience. When he was younger, a common cold would mean emergency room visits and hospital admission. It meant nebulizers, inhalers, steroids, and supplemental oxygen. Every 4 hours, I would be up giving him another treatment and checking on him as he slept if he wasn't right next to me to make sure he wasn't struggling to breathe. Measles is a respiratory illness that causes a telltale blotchy rash. For children too young to be vaccinated or those with underlying conditions, it can be especially dangerous. I fear for my child who has asthma. Measles can have very serious consequences. It is fatal for 1 in 1,000 children who contract it. Measles kills 100,000 people a year around the world, mostly children under the age of 5. Wisconsin, like only a handful of states, including Washington, where there is a measles outbreak, I'm sure you've heard it, allows non-medical vaccine waivers for public school attendance. Most of the individuals who contracted measles, a highly contagious airborne pathogen, were not vaccinated. Washington State is now considering changing this policy in order to better protect its students. Wisconsin should do the same in order to keep its children safe, in order to keep all people safe. Herd immunity requires, or for measles at least, requires at least 90%, but ideally more than 95% of individuals to be vaccinated. Many of the public schools in Eau Claire are within the 90% measure, but it is slipping. One school, however, is 30 percentage points below it. Chippewa Valley Montessori School has a 66% vaccination rate, and the large majority of these waivers are non-medical. 28% of students there have a personal conviction waiver. Immunization rates by school can be found at www.dhs.wisconsin.gov, and I urge you to look at them. I did not consider sending my child to this public school option because the Montessori school does not have herd immunity. This was a risk that I thought was too great to take when measles is only a plane ride away. I do not believe that my child's public school choices should be limited because parents, against the advice of scientists and medical professionals, refuse to vaccinate their children. Vaccines are universally supported by medical professionals and organizations and shown to be safe and effective for protecting the most vulnerable among us. I want my child to have the same opportunities as others. I want public schools to be safe for all students. My child does not have a choice to have asthma, but parents that do not vaccinate their children do. And they put my child at risk at school.
Thank you.
Oh,
I'm sorry, your time is up.
all right.
But thank you for coming. Come back if you'd like.
I will come back and read the rest.
Thank you.
You've got 12
I'd like
years
that.
with
I'd
me.
love that. Thank you. Please do. Okay, and that takes us then to Bobby Green.
Thank you. First, I want to say that I know that you guys have tough decisions to make all the time, and often those decisions mean that you're going to make somebody angry either way. So I'm not mad at you. I don't dislike you, but I'm not happy with this memorial idea for the stadium. I've got some concerns about the maintenance costs for this. I haven't seen those figures, and maybe they're out there, but I haven't seen them in the public yet. I'd like to know how often the turf needs to be replaced, or what kind of maintenance costs are associated with this turf. If those costs go up with more usage, and by that I mean intramural sports, and we talked about letting Fayed use this surface, and if that decreases the life of this turf that is probably very expensive to replace, who pays for that, and how often? Carson Park, I don't understand, and I was looking for the numbers today, so I apologize. I don't understand if Carson Park currently gets perhaps a fee from Memorial or other groups that use their fields. I would imagine at least the intramural sports who use those fields are probably paying some kind of fee to Carson Park. I consider Carson Park historically important to us and frankly a jewel to the city of Eau Claire. And I don't want to, in 5 years, be at another meeting trying to figure out how to save Carson Park because the stadium opened up at Memorial where all these youth football teams went to play their games for a few dollars cheaper, and we then starve Carson Park of certain kinds of funding or our overall Parks and Rec budget. So I think that should be considered. I'm worried also about the future of Memorial versus North. If we allow wealthy alumni or wealthy parents of current students or whoever these undisclosed donors are to pay for pet projects, frankly, in my opinion, a vanity project, what will our schools look like in 30 years? Is it going to be the haves and the have-nots? And what kind of impact does that have on property values on each side of town? What kind of impacts does that have on the students going to those different schools? I don't think it's right, and I want the board to really think about that. One more thing. Oh, and I just don't think the budget allows for this. Even though you're getting this huge gift, it still is a huge expenditure that I think that if we're going to spend that kind of money, you guys are very good at identifying important academic needs, and to me this isn't one of them. So anyways, I'm very much against it. So thank you.
Thank you. That takes us then to our final speaker for this evening, which is Mark Goings.
Good evening. My name is Mark Goings. I live at E17450 County Road V in Augusta. And Patty, if it's possible, I was going to show a few things on here. I'm so excited that the board is looking at, as one of the agenda items tonight, the extended timeline for employee engagement plan and further OPEB and budgetary study. I firmly believe that our staff is our greatest asset in leading the community toward better education in Eau Claire. And I think this is an amazing first step. What I would ask or encourage the board, though, is it needs to be a broader budgetary look than just looking at OPEB. You know, it's kind of the idea that by asking better questions, you get better answers. And so when you're thinking about the goals of that group, think about global decisions, broader decisions. Just as a board, you are trying to figure out how to put all the pieces together. And so one of the things that, as the board is looking at things tonight, I would suggest you also look at the December 3rd report, that was just a few months ago. Because it's interesting because, like tonight, there's a comparison of like OPEB and local communities. On December 3rd, there was a slide very much like that. There was a $2.2 million difference between December 3rd and now. And basically, before we were comparing with schools like Menominee and La Crosse, and tonight's slide we're looking at like Cornell and Lake Holcomb. When we're looking at comparables, we can decide who we're comparable to. But also, in looking at budgets and compensation, for years we looked globally at what's compensation for staff. That means like insurance, it means your salary, it means Broadview compensation. Back in December, when we looked at some of those things, we looked at Broadview salary and benefits. We're kind of Midland. That's, and Lake Holcomb and Cornell are on there too. Or if you looked at some of our other comparables, the top 10 districts, things like that. And so when we're trying to find a fit, because I totally get that as a district, we're facing budget issues and we're looking at a potential shortfall. But anytime we focus on just one area, that kind of puts us in a box to try to figure out the answer from just a piece. And so I'm hoping that this larger committee that helps advise the board would not be put in that smaller box. That would be a chance for them to be able to look at the broader questions of how do we fund this system, and again, getting the staff input along the way. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes our public forum section of the meeting and takes us then to the board and administrative reports. So Superintendent's report, Dr. Hardebeck.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I'd like to review the upcoming school board events. All of these events take place here at the administration building with the exception of one. Tomorrow, March 5th at 7 p.m., there will be a Family Advisory Council meeting. On March 7th at 4 p.m., there will be a meeting of the Revenue Committee. March 12th at 4 p.m., a meeting of the LEAP Committee. March 13th at 1 p.m., the Budget Development Committee meeting. March 14th at 4 p.m., the Revenue Committee. March 14th at 6:30, there will be a school board candidate forum, and that will be held at CVTC's Business Education Center. On March 18th at 8:45 a.m., there's a meeting of the Policy and Governance Committee, and at 7 p.m. of the regular school board meeting. And then on March 21st, there is a meeting of the Demographic Trends and Facility Planning Committee, and that will take place at 4:30. So I am very pleased tonight to honor 4 ECASD teachers for achieving their national board cohort of teacher certification, and to congratulate 2 additional teachers who have had their certifications renewed. And just before the board meeting started, there was a reception for these teachers honoring this certification. This rigorous certification process of nationally board certified teacher survey data identify these instructors as more confident in their classroom instruction and share a growth in classroom student achievement. And the whole idea of going for this certification is to improve one's practice as a teacher and to improve one's performance and ultimately the results that they get with students. So I would like to congratulate, and I'll ask you to stand up, Amanda Domes from Prairie Ridge, Mariah Howling from Prairie Ridge, Lindsay Rudabush from Meadowview, Aaron Peters from Meadowview. And then we had 2 teachers who recertified. One is Nick Sarek from DeLong. Nick. And Kathy Anderson, who is retired and is at the emeritus stage, but she renewed as well, and she's back there, and she's been helping with the cohorts and helping to coach. So we're very appreciative of those efforts, Kathy. Congratulations. So now I would like to recognize someone who typically works behind the scenes, Carrie Halquist. Is Carrie here? There she is, Carrie. You have to stand up. So we can, so we can talk to you. Congratulations, Carrie. She's received the 2019 School Safety Coordinator of the Year Award from the Wisconsin School Safety Coordinators Association. You can see she's shy. She sat right back down. This award recognizes Carrie's work in maintaining and constantly improving security, safety, and health throughout the district. She is a certified school risk manager. She's been the district safety coordinator since 2014, and she's also served in the same role between 2002 and 2010. In the interim, she was a safety, security, and risk manager for the Chippewa Valley Technical College. So we're glad that we were able to steal her back. Carrie holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from UW-Eau Claire and a master's degree in risk control from UW-Stout. For many years, Carrie has done a tremendous job of ensuring our schools remain safe and secure while providing a positive learning environment for our students and staff. And needless to say, we are thrilled about her recognition with this award. I can tell you that as we made the applications for the safety grants for the state, which brought in nearly $1 million in safety improvements and professional development for our staff in upgrading our safety and security of all of our campuses, Carrie really shepherded those applications through the process. And I can tell you, as a superintendent, I never lost one moment of sleep about these applications because I knew they were in such good hands. So, Carrie, you did a fantastic job, and I'm so glad to see you get this recognition. And then we have Rachel Bredigan. Rachel, where are you? Oh, right in front. Good. And she has received the 2018-19 UWEC, Wisconsin Association of Colleges for Teacher Education Early Career Educator Award. Wow. So this is great. This professional award is given annually to an outstanding educator within his or her first 3 years of teaching, and $500 is awarded by UWEC for Rachel's accomplishments. So, Rachel, we're very proud of you, and congratulations on getting this distinction. And that is the end of my report for tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Hardebeck. So for my President's Report tonight, I first want to remind folks about the upcoming listening session dates regarding elementary school boundaries. So there are 4 left. This week there is a session tomorrow from 4:30 to 6 p.m. at South Middle School, and on Wednesday from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Memorial High School. So the subject tomorrow night is expansion of elementary schools, and the subject on Wednesday night is supporting families through transition. If you cannot attend in person, there is a website online where you can view the session videos and send in your questions or comments. And there is an FAQ sheet on that website that they continue to add more to. So I counted today and it was 86, and I'm sure it'll just keep on growing, so that's good. But there is childcare available at all of those listening sessions, so we hope that you can attend. I cannot personally attend those 2 sessions. I will be in Madison this week speaking at the Healthy Wisconsin Leadership Conference. I want to remind folks about the Budget Action Workshop and Training. That will be on Saturday, March 9th. It will be taking place from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. at Schofield Hall. The sponsors of that event include the university and also the Wisconsin Public Education Network and the ACLU and others. But you can register online, and I posted the link on my school district blog and Facebook, and I know Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle shared it as well. She and I are both helping facilitate, along with Commissioner Torres and others out in the community. I want to remind board members to take the self-assessment survey if you have not had the chance yet, and I will hope to hold a work session regarding our self-evaluation at the March 18th meeting. And finally, I know that Dr. Hardebeck mentioned that we have the candidate forum on March 14th at 6:30 p.m. at CVTC. I hope to see many of you there. There are 4 candidates who are running for 3 seats, and we have all of the 4 candidates here today. So we have Commissioner Torres, who is running, we have Commissioner Harder, who's running, and we also have 2 newcomers. We have Tim Nordine, and we have Eric Azur. So thank you both for coming to the meeting and for running. And that is it for my president's report. And that takes us then to the student representatives report. And Molly, take it away.
Gwen, our memorial student representative, will be a little late today, so I'm going to read her report for her today. So she says that students, teachers, and staff are continuing to see the impact of snow days on our learning. It's been difficult to get back into the routine, but on another note, however, Memorial High School Theater has performed a piece that has been worked on hard and for quite some time now. And all other student activities and clubs are continuing despite the weather delays. And then for the North student report, students are still catching up from all the snow days. AP classes are especially moving along quickly in order to get through all the material for the test. The North DECA students are competing in state this week. Juniors are continuing to study for the postponed ACT, and the rest of the student body is wishing for spring. All jokes aside, the student body is grateful for the safe and responsible calls made this winter. As hard as they may be, we've accepted that this winter is one of a kind, and we thank the school board for making snow day calls that are in everybody's best interest, so thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that concludes the student representatives report and takes us to committee reports. So first, Policy and Governance Committee.
We meet today, and we have a proposal for Policy 886, Relations with Tribal Authorities, ready for a first reading and the full board consideration.
Thank you. Is there a report from the Budget Committee?
Yes, we met and discussed beginning the process of defining objectives and principles around staff engagement, the Staff Engagement Committee and process on budget questions like OPEB. We also discussed the development of a rubric or common set of criteria for assessing special programming costs and talking about programs like the virtual school, dual immersion, LEAP stuff. Like the culinary decision that came through a few months ago would be a good example of this. Just trying to help make sure that the committee, the Budget Development Committee, can best support the board in making those budget decisions in a consistent way. Yeah, that was pretty much what we discussed in that. We're meeting again soon.
All right, thank you. And I know Commissioner Klinkhammer isn't here for LEAP, but Ms. Kohler, is there anything you'd like to share?
The last 2 LEAP committees have been canceled due to weather, but we're planning to meet on Tuesday next week.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other committee reports, updates? All right. That takes us then to legislative update. Do you have an update, Commissioner Torres? Okay. That then takes us to the consent agenda. So we will consider all of these items, and if you would like to pull one, please indicate that. So I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of closed session for February 8th, 2019, the minutes of February 18th, 2019, the minutes of closed session February 18th, 2019, the Human Resources and Employment Report, Summer 2019 Referendum Bid Awards, and School Board Handbook Modifications. So I would entertain a motion to approve 8.2 through 8.7. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Vu. Is there a second? Okay. I believe because the bid awards are financial, we'll do a roll call vote on this.
Commissioner Luganbill,
Yes.
Commissioner Torres,
Yes.
Commissioner Vu,
Yes.
Commissioner Bika,
Yes.
Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle,
Yes.
and Commissioner Harder.
Yes.
Thank you. And with your approval of the handbook modifications 8.7, we have one update that you'll see under 11.4 later that I'll share. That then takes us to our individually considered resolutions, the first being which I'm assuming some people are here for, which is the inclement weather makeup days. So who is presenting that this evening? All right, thank you.
So, Patty, you're going to help me, right? Okay. So I kind of feel like, a little bit like that old country song, Here We Go Again. We had a plan in place, and we're ready to begin implementing that plan, and had started implementing it, and then we had more inclement weather. So as we go through the policy, you'll see the alignment to our strategic plan. As we look for ways to meet the required instructional minutes at each level, our focus is the continued academic and social emotional growth of our students. I know there have been a lot of interruptions, and I appreciate the student board members' remarks about those interruptions and how they have really impacted and had an influence on what's been happening at the high school level. At the same time, we want to take into consideration the effects of any decision we make has on families and on the community as well. So I just want to do a quick review with you about the 2019 weather days. As of today, our school day has been closed or delayed by weather 12 times. 9 of those dates were full-day cancellations, and 3 days included 2-hour delays. The plan that was developed at the February 18th board meeting addressed the cancellations and the delays between January 28th and February 13th, and you can see that on the chart. However, the cancellations and delays since then also need to be made up, and those are the minutes surrounding tonight's discussion. We have 3 options for you to consider. We have, as you might imagine, and I think you probably have gotten lots of emails with suggestions, and we've tried to incorporate those suggestions into these options and use them to inform the options that we've prepared for you. So if you go to, you can go back one, thank you. Based on the current delays and cancellations, each level would need to make up the following. Elementary school needs to make up 1 day. February 25th was a makeup day for elementary and was also a snow day. Middle school needs to make up 3 days. February 20th and February 25th, and additional minutes not recovered in the previous plan. Memorial High School needs to make up 3 days, February 20th, February 25th, and 3 2-hour delays. And North High School needs to make up 4 days, February 20th, February 25th, 3 2-hour delays, and February 26th for the power outage that occurred when the transformer failed. So there are several options to make up those dates. I'm going to ask that you let us go through the options, and then let's have some discussion and questions. So option 1, to repurpose 1 day and add additional minutes each day. This option repurposes a professional development day and adding minutes to recover additional time at middle school and high school. May 17th would be a repurpose from a professional development day to a student day for elementary and middle school. This would bring the elementary school within the required minutes. In order to make up for additional time needed at the middle and high school, middle schools would begin 20 minutes early, beginning on March 11th, through the end of the year. During that same time frame, both high schools would begin 30 minutes early. In addition, North High School would shorten their lunch period by 5 minutes. Because middle school is using the May 17th day as well, they have fewer minutes per day that need to be made up. So there are benefits and challenges to this option. The benefits to this challenge are that it allows the district and community summer program to remain intact. The school calendar remains the same. Adding to the beginning of the day is feasible for student transit and can be managed. There's an estimated savings of $65,000 in transportation for the remainder of the year because it isn't a day missed for a day being transported. And the school year certified staff are not overpaid under this model. There are some challenges, though, to this option, and they include this translates to an additional 3 to 5 minutes per class. Families and staff are impacted over 50-plus days. The school year hourly staff could incur some overtime or be overpaid, and this could range from anywhere from $90,000 to $180,000. The secondary school bell schedules will not align, causing conflicts for traveling teachers, and we know that there is at least one teacher who would have to manage their travel time in a different way. Bus routes may start as early as 6 a.m. Concerns about attendance first hour and around the shortened lunch. There's an additional cost for the gap in transportation between the morning secondary routes and Prairie Ridge, and families of elementary students would need to arrange for childcare. The maximum cost of this, when everything flushes out, is about $25,000. Option 2. This is to repurpose non-student days. And you can see on the chart that the second option we're presenting is to repurpose spring break to recover the necessary instructional minutes. Under this proposal, we would repurpose May 17th from a PD day to a student day, March 25th, 26th, and 27th during spring break become professional development days for elementary staff. In middle school, we would repurpose May 17th from a PD day to a student day, and March 25th and 26th during spring break would become a student day, and March 27th would become professional development day for staff. For Memorial, March 25th, 26th, and 27th become student days, and for North, March 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th become student days. The benefits of this option include that we recover full days of instruction. Instructional time falls prior to the high-stakes testing that takes place at the high school and at the middle and elementary school with AP testing, forward testing, and the ACT exams. District and community programs for summer would remain intact. Families and staff are impacted on fewer days overall, and there's a hard stop to the school year. It is cost neutral for transportation. Teaching and Learning has the option to deliver professional development that was canceled due to inclement weather, including professional development for hourly employees. But there are challenges, and some of these challenges are that families and staff are likely to have had prearranged plans on these days. It requires rescheduling for spring athletics. Families of elementary students would need to arrange for childcare. We are uncertain about our ability to cover substitutes for all staff that may be absent during this time because of, pre-planning. And it requires staff to take personal days or days without pay for pre-scheduled travel. Staff have been paid for each of the weather days thus far, and these days would make up for those paid days. We're really unable to cost out the subpay and the pay deduct costs because we don't know at this point how many people are affected. We do know that there are a considerable number of people who have been affected because they have reached out to us. But on a typical day, we can usually cover about 60 subs. We anticipate that there would be more than that. And how many more, we're not sure. And now we move to option 3, and this is to extend the school year. This is the third and final option. Students would attend additional days to recover instructional minutes. In additional weather closure arise, the end date for students would be adjusted. We just keep going out further and further. In elementary, we would repurpose May 17th from a PD day to a student day. In addition, elementary staff would remain at school on June 10th, 11th, and 12th to participate in professional development. Middle school would repurpose May 17th from a PD to a student day. Middle school students would also attend on Monday, June 10th, and Tuesday, June 11th. Although only a few hours of instruction are needed on June 11th at the middle level, this would provide a buffer since future delays might occur. In addition, middle school staff would remain at school on June 12th to participate in professional development. Memorial High School students would attend school on June 10th, 11th, and 12th. North High School students would attend school on June 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th. The staff has been paid for the missed professional development days, so it's recommended that elementary staff and middle school staff attend PD while high school staff are providing instruction to students. So the benefits are that this recovers full days of instruction and professional development opportunities for staff. Families and staff are impacted on fewer days overall. It's cost neutral for transportation. It's expected to be cost neutral for staffing, although we do anticipate that there would be some sub-costs. T&L has the option to deliver PD that was canceled due to weather. Families and staff may have prearranged plans on these dates as well. Graduation dates would not change. District summer programming and community partner programs would be seriously impacted. There's an estimated loss of $310,000 in revenue that would occur from summer school. Instructional time falls after the advanced placement test, the forward, and the ACT exams, so it doesn't help students in terms of preparing for those exams. And the families of elementary students would need to arrange for child care. So the maximum net cost to this would be $310,000 in lost revenue from summer school. We have had people reach out to us asking questions about a waiver. And I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that Wisconsin does not have a mechanism to allow the Department of Public Instruction, State Superintendent, or the governor to waive minutes of instruction. There is an existing waiver, but this waiver is specifically designed for districts that know that they cannot meet minutes in a given year, such as those who need to extend the summer session due to referendum construction. You may also have heard about recently proposed Assembly bill by Tony Kurtz and Travis Trinnell. This proposal is to allow a one-time blanket waiver due to weather, but it has not progressed beyond the Assembly. And I think it's impossible to predict whether or not this bill will pass, and waiting for that process could take away some of the options that we have to make up instructional minutes. So we could do a quick review of the options, and those are listed for you on this chart. I'm not going to read through them again, but they're there for your reference. And once again, I'll just ask Patty to move forward very quickly so you can see a picture of our lovely students, and then we'll go back to the hard decisions. And I am thinking of our person who spoke in the public comment about another topic, saying that this is going to be a difficult decision because no matter what you decide, someone's going to be unhappy and someone's going to be affected negatively by it. So I'll open it up for discussion and questions, and Abby Johnson and Kim Kohler will be helping out as in terms of answering some of these questions along with me.
So I have one question just to start off, and it's regarding option 1, but I guess could be about any of the options, but more specific to option 1. With the minutes that would be built in with the modification of the bell schedule as well as the repurposing of the non-student day, would that only get us up to the days that we owe right now? Or would that build us some sort of a buffer in case there is an inclement weather day or two next month or the month after? Because I know last year we did have snowstorms in March and even one in April, I think. So, Ms. Kohler?
For middle school and high school, it allows a 2-hour delay buffer.
Okay.
Elementary school would be okay with a full day cancellation.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Torres?
Thank you. Since most likely we will have more snow days, perhaps a combination of option 1 and option 3 could be the solution. But I would like to ask why turning the morning of Good Friday into a school day or a school half day was not considered.
I could answer that. So prior to bringing these options to you, we discussed these options with our private school partners. They're very much opposed to using Good Friday to make up a day, and I think for religious purposes. But also, we have to make the time available from 11 o'clock until 3 o'clock available for people to be able to come and go. Logistically, in handling that kind of situation with staff and with substitutes would be very difficult. I think it also, again, kind of takes us out of that respect for that day that has been in the calendar for a long time.
Do you have more on that? Do you have anything more on that?
Well, thank you for that response, but still we can use the time, right? It's legally possible.
It is legally possible, but we have to be able to let staff come and go from 11 until 3 o'clock. So that would mean that we would have schools that would have large numbers of staff leaving during that time. And to provide coverage and supervision during that time would be very difficult.
Oh.
And we are mandated to do that by state statute.
Yeah, well, perhaps I said, I should have said not the full day, but just the morning, right? From 7 to 11.
So, Kim, can you talk a little bit about what that gets us back in terms of minutes and hours?
It would perhaps help us with another 2-hour delay. It wouldn't help us recover enough for a full day closure. The reason is that student transit would need to transport elementary and secondary, and so they would technically be running both routes. So if secondary needed to leave by 10:30, or I'm sorry, elementary needed to leave by 10:30, that means secondary would need to leave more along the lines of 9:30. So we'd really gain about 2 hours of instruction that day.
How expensive is to consider Saturdays instead of days at the end of the school year?
That's a really great question. I think we would have a couple of challenges on the transportation side, depending on the levels that we need to transport. And I think, assuming elementary would stay okay, looking at middle and high school, I would guess it would probably average about $20,000 per Saturday. And that's assuming that student transit had enough staff that could, actually make that service happen for us. And those are just ballpark numbers based upon some other questions that I've asked.
Thank you. Commissioner Hombuck-Boyle?
Yeah, I just have a question about a comparison between option 1 and option 2. In option 1, there was a approximate $25,000 piece attached to that. If we average 60 plus subs per day, and we don't know what that is, we can probably be pretty certain that we would be spending more than $25,000 with option 2, correct? So I'm just saying 60 subs is 100, what is it, a sub per day?
$137 a day.
So
60 subs is about $8,200 a day.
So depending on what happens, for people and calling in subs and not having enough subs, that to me is another not safe, kind of a nightmarish kind of thing to think about.
Right. The other challenge in option 2 to calculate the maximum cost is we're looking at days for transportation. And so that works. But again, I think that coming back to the staffing option, is Student Transit able to staff for a week that, people had planned on having off? So I think with option 2 as well, looking at just transporting middle and high school students, I think that's feasible, but then to add the elementary into the mix could create a challenge from a staffing standpoint for them as well.
Commissioner Vu?
I have a question, and then I will state my preference. On option 3, estimate loss of $310,000. Is that part of the built-in budget expense, that income that would need to be utilized in the coming budget?
Yes, so the $310,000 comes from the summer school minute calculation that's added to our revenue limit. And so Jim provided me some information on the number of minutes that typically happen the first week of summer school. And when we convert that into FTE and $9,800 approximately for our revenue limit amount, that's where the $310,000 comes from. So if we look at, and this year it's probably more because I think we probably have more offerings that very first week of summer school, that takes a big impact to our revenue limit. And so yes, that would create a minimum shortfall of $310,000 because our revenue limit would go down because the number of minutes we can claim goes down.
I have one more question. Option 1. Bus routes may start as early as 6 a.m. Could you explain more of that implication, and what is the percent of impact and what type of students?
I'll start, you can chime in. It would be our secondary students. And that would just back up. Right now, some of our middle school and high school students might get on the bus as early as 6:30, so by backing everything up by a half an hour, it could be close to 6 o'clock. Student Transit was, interested or willing to look at, boy, could we make that 6:05 or 6:07, but still relatively early. In comparison to what they have right now.
Commissioner Bika?
I want to say, I want to thank all the staff members, dozens of staff members that have written with feedback, and I hope that you'll continue to do that on issues all going forward in the future. This is more of a couple of teaching and learning questions. We heard from a number of people that there's a significant difference between recovering a full instructional day and simply adding minutes, and that it's difficult for many people to compartmentalize classes in that way. And so I was hoping to hear from other people, and especially from a teaching learning perspective, how should I be thinking about that issue? And my second question is, what is the significance of loss of instructional time before these high stakes exams? And so again, I have, we've heard some perspectives through email and speakers, and I'd like a more holistic perception about that. And then this is just a final comment, not a question. As we know, There is research about adolescent sleep schedules. This board has taken it up before I was a member of it. And so there is a cost with option one that has not been considered, whether it be attentiveness in school, achievement in school, or even accident rates in the community.
So the adding of minutes has a greater positive impact at the elementary level as we talk to the elementary staff, because when you get toward the high school, the lessons tend to be modular. And so typically if you have 5 extra minutes for a class, you don't start 5 minutes in and then pick it up the next day. You tend to stop, and so it's not as much of an advantage. However, so having those days like over spring break would be great, but there's also an equity issue of whether or not all students would actually be attending at that time. So while you may actually have those full days of lessons and before the state testing, if the students are all not there, then you have, another problem. In terms, so, clearly time before the testing is regardless of whether it's longer class periods or additional days before the assessments are, much more preferred than having the time come after. And was there another, I can't remember if did that cover what you needed?
Okay. Commissioner Torres and then Commissioner Harder.
What would happen with the classes that's the early bird classes?
They're earlier.
Very early bird.
One thing to keep in mind with those early bird classes is that we don't provide transportation for them. So it doesn't impact, it's still impactful to transportation, but not as bad as it could be. Now we just have kids on the road earlier.
Did you have something, Commissioner Harder?
Just another question about the cost of the summer option, the $310,000. Is that calculated as lost revenue, or is that lost revenue against costs?
It's strictly lost revenue.
Yeah.
Because the way that revenue is calculated is the number of minutes, and then that's converted into FTE.
And so the costs that we would normally have to generate those minutes, we wouldn't have those costs, right?
Correct.
Yes, that is correct.
So it's not quite, 310 is maybe a little
It's probably a little
lower
bit high.
from that calculation, right? Lower number, if we calculate it in terms of costs versus revenue, rather than just lost revenue.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have a question regarding option 2, and it's mostly just because understanding that not even considering what we don't know about staff who have plans, but what we do know. We have I believe the choir, orchestra, and band at both of our high schools have trips, or at least most of them have trips that are planned and that they're going on. So that's a huge group of students at the secondary level. I'm wondering if we were to schedule classes on spring break, how would we handle pre-arranged student absences, vacations, and how would we handle staff planned vacations? Would there be, has there been thought about, would the district require those staff to take personal time, or would those days be grandfathered or forgiven, or if they've already planned it? I'm wondering if that's been a conversation that's taken place with the staff in terms of accommodating those absences, but also student absences if they have a prearranged trip, particularly if it's with a school group.
So I haven't been part very much of the student piece of it. I would assume that they would be excused absences because they're gone, and Ms. Kohler's shaking her head yes. What we have talked about a lot is the staff piece. And so the thing that needs to be kept in mind is that all of the time that the staff hasn't reported, they've been paid for. So if the staff is going to be gone, they would either need to take a pay deduct or a personal day for that time that they're gone during the week of spring break, because they've already been paid for it, and then if they're not working, then we wouldn't double pay them or do something different.
And how many personal days, like an average, do our staff have if they're?
Well, they can have up to a maximum of 5. You can only get to 5 in your bank, and I
Right.
believe we start the year with 3, I think is the correct, yep.
So say there's just scenario, if there's a staff person, they have bought their plane tickets, they're going to Jamaica for a week, and they do not have the days banked, how will we handle that systemically?
Sure. So we talked about that a little bit, and they would need to enter their absence in our absence system, ASOP, and then it would be processed as a pay deduct. And so then they would, their paycheck would go down for those days because they were already paid previously for those days. So right now, they're paid ahead. They're prepaid for those days. And so that's how it would be handled.
Okay. Are there other board member questions so far? Just trying to go through each of these proposals and kind of figure out the details, logistics. The busing one, I'm assuming with option 1 that 4K is not impacted because they do their own thing with busing. Am I accurate in that, or would it be impacted?
I think in Model 1, the 4K would not be impacted because they have a separate, they don't have time built into their calendar to make up snow days, and so they typically will make up their time on Fridays. And so that piece is independent of this proposal here.
Commissioner Torres.
It seems to me that option 1 help us only to a certain point, to catch up with what we've already used or missed, and we would need an addition that would come from option 2 or option 3. Right, so I think that we need to think about a combination of options. So the question would be, what would generate more absenteeism, option 2 or option 3? Because my guess is that people will go on with their plans. So can we decide what would be the least impactful?
Right. So I agree. I'm kind of thinking of a hybrid also, Commissioner. Oh, sorry. I'm thinking of a hybrid also, Commissioner Torres. I'm wondering. So I with the Monday of spring break, if that were to be a day, and at the very worst, if a staff does not have any days banked, they're losing 1 day. If they have a prearranged absence and they put it in ASOP, but then that would be an additional day. That would, I think, I agree with what Commissioner Bika is saying about we're trying to make a decision about makeups in the logistical sense, but we also have to discuss it in the educational sense about what's best for our students and some of these courses that really rely on a set number of days. So I'm wondering if we were to add March 25th as a day, then you still have the that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There's still those 6 days after. I'm wondering if we were to do that, how much would we be able to modify the earlier starts by, if we just did the rest of option 1? But if you had an entire day being used, what would that look like?
So each day is about 7 minutes.
Okay.
That's required. So let me double check that. And while I'm double checking that, I just want to clarify as well that each of the 3 options presented brings us up to speed, but does not provide a buffer.
Right.
So the minutes do not provide a buffer, nor do the full days that are listed there. Yes, so 7 minutes times 58 days, yeah. So at high school, it's about 7 minutes equals 1 day, and at middle school, it's about 8 minutes equals 1 day.
So high school would start, you're saying high school would start 23 minutes earlier under option 1 if we had March 25th be scheduled. Okay. the April 19th idea that Commissioner Torres brought up about I keep wanting to say Black Friday. I'm not sure why. Black Friday. Good Friday. Are there other board members who would like to explore that? I'm kind of feeling that it might be too much hassle, but I'm open if other board members. Okay. Commissioner Bika?
I'm kind of drawn to, back to the old days when you just added school at the end of the year. Because I think there are more snow days coming. And so the way we're trying to chop it up, we'll be back here again. And I'm really conflicted because of the assessment, the high stakes testing. But the idea that we have a strategy, you go longer in June. And I think when you take away spring break, or a day of spring break, there's a lot of change to people's plans that have to be made. And the adding on in June is appealing to me because it's a set strategy and that we keep following that. But one other thing I wanted to say, I think we all know it, when we're talking about teacher contracts and days paid, I think we all realize that during snow days, teachers are working on course materials. Teachers are revising, they're planning new materials to think about how they're going to meet back up with their students for the instructional time that was lost and revise. I think we all recognize that, and it's just worth mentioning.
Thank you. Commissioner Vu?
There isn't a perfect solution. I was just hoping that Mark Going was right when he asked for no more day of snow. But I want to err on the side that we go with option 1, but also built in with the idea that if we have to have a snow day again, automatically default to more days after June 10th.
After June 10th being the Monday, so it's including June 10th and then...
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. But I do want to add that we are as flexible as we can regarding bus route and early bird options. If family can afford to drive on their own without using the bus, let it be. If district has to reimburse family for having to use their own personal vehicle to avoid the 6 o'clock, fine way to do that too. I'm just thinking out loud.
Right. Commissioner Humbert-Boyle and then Ms. Green.
I tend to go with what was already said, Commissioner Bika, Commissioner Vu on option 1 and add the days at the end of the year, but I would like to put a tag on that to say I've done a lot of reading about what other districts do relative to snow days, and there are some options that we could look on and put a committee together so that I read this great, I think it was about where they had their lesson plans for snow days, and the kids were out measuring snow, and they were doing weather reports, and they were doing videos and all that sort. I mean, there's ways of being able to involve kids using technology on snow days, which we haven't really explored, and I think that might be kind of a thing for us to look at along with this, so this doesn't happen again.
So we have looked at what are called E-days, and I'd like for Mr. Schmidt to talk about some of our challenges with that for this year, but going forward for next year, I think that could be a possibility.
Yeah, I just think we could move that so that we do.
Yeah, we have 305 different teachers have an online platform account that they facilitate with their students. Not all of our teachers do that because not everyone has students with a one-to-one device, because typically that's the way you'd conduct that type of environment. So if you consider roughly 800 teachers, so about 3/8 of our teachers have that platform. So we're just not equipped at this time to really leverage that. I mean, because we're just not all sitting in that space to be able to facilitate that type of learning across the board.
But it is something that we need to look at.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And one of the reasons that we're in kind of a different place with different schools and different teachers is that when we looked at the full plate issue, that was an option, that you could have an online platform, but it was not required. And we took that off because we had so many concerns about all of the initiatives that we had. So that was one that we put to the side. And maybe it's one we're going to have to look at more closely going forward, because that would give us some options that we don't have now.
Make a motion?
I just wanted to say that I agree with Dr. Vika. I like the idea of option 3 because it's something that everybody expects it. And one thing that kind of worries me about option 1, about starting earlier, is because Gwen and I, being students day in, day out, we see students who don't have enough sleep, and the lack of sleep and how that affects their learning and the motivation. And I especially worry about kids who are working part-time jobs and are closing late at night, that are already struggling to stay awake and to stay engaged during the entire day. And I think that starting even earlier would really affect that, especially with North having roughly about a 43% of students who are economically disadvantaged. I think that's something to definitely look forward, pay attention to, because it's something that definitely interferes with their learning. And so, yeah.
I might add, regarding Commissioner Bika's comment, I believe someone might have to fact check me on this, but teachers are encouraged to come in during snow days if they are able.
Is that okay? Commissioner Harder?
Yeah, option 3 is appealing. It's also scary with the 310,000, and I'd just like to I don't know if we have any sense at all of the number. How much lower than $310,000 does it represent as actual sort of loss versus?
Off the top of my head, it would be a little bit challenging because we would need to work together to figure out what contracts do we have in place for that week. So when I'm thinking about it, the Parks and Rec program starts and the YMCA program starts. One of the ideas we had early on was, could we just shift summer school back? But that's extremely challenging because of the buckets. And we typically do a 3-week session of summer school and then like a 4-week over the month of July and then a 3-week to end the summer. And so we talked about, could you just like move programming? Could you look at different times? And we couldn't come up with a feasible way to do that. So I really wouldn't have a good idea and value of what that would look like at this point in time.
But it's about really that first week, or was it 2 weeks?
The first week is really what we looked at for the 310,000 because almost 1/6 of all of summer school minutes occurred during that first week.
And there are some costs that are unavoidable at this point, I assume, but some costs that would go away if that week was canceled, correct?
Yeah, yes, I would agree. That's correct.
It would be interesting to know the mix, because that is a scary number.
It's a very scary number.
Yeah.
Not even only for us, but I'm sure for
Yeah.
our partners as well.
Yeah. And I very much agree with the concerns, and was going to mention them myself, about the option 1 and what it does to our students who are, I've felt for a long time, are already pushed to get up earlier. And with three boys in middle school and high school, I see the effects of that every day. So I share those concerns.
Could I just make one comment about the summer school? We do have contracts with our summer school partners, and they are depending on that income. So that is a consideration. I mean, I like I said, there really is no good solution. It's
right.
Yeah.
Other board member comments or questions at this time? Students? Okay. One of the questions that's brought up is obviously none of these, no matter, even with any of these, none of them really help with the March 12th date, which is the ACT. So, and I know another comment that's been brought is AP. You know, they need that time, they really rely on that time. Obviously, the decisions of the entire district in a matter like this, we really can't just look at through the lens of AP or ACT, but I'm wondering if that's an additional component that we could discuss, is at those levels, if there could be like a few sessions put together, maybe on the weekend that would be available, or I don't know. I'm just because obviously they rely on those actual chunks of time for that. So I'm just wondering if that's something that has been discussed within the AP courses or with the people who are proctoring the ACT or helping with prepping for that.
You're going to have some of the same issues you have with any, I mean, now you're getting into a contractual arrangement in terms of days work for teachers, that would involve
Sure.
HR. So, I mean, in finding those buckets of time when they're actually, you know, coordinating a teacher schedule outside of the hour or the days already assigned, and then the students and whether or not they can actually attend becomes as complicated as trying to hope that they're out there over spring break.
Right.
I might add that teachers already set up review sessions for their AP classes. This is not something new.
Right. And I'm saying beyond that, making up the actual course time, because, yeah, yeah, this is a difficult situation. Commissioner Torres?
I'm also thinking about the students that are not performing at grade level, which is significantly higher than those taking AP classes.
Right.
So I'm thinking that still a combination of option 1 and option 3 would be the best, because that will give us the additional time to address both, bringing both issues, bringing students up to grade level and supporting those who are performing beyond grade level, above grade level.
Thank you. I have a question about option 3, which is I know you had mentioned I believe you had said the rotation for summer programs, which was something like 3-4-3 or 4-3-3. So the discussion of could it be a 4-3-4 or a 4-4-3 or something like that, where you would just add on 1 week either in the middle or at the end. What were kind of the holdups? I would assume maybe 4th of July, but was there more?
And there's also facilities. So some of the facilities are already planned to be used on that 4th week, which would be the 4th of July week. So if, for example, like the swimming program with Parks and Rec, they also are running other classes during so some classes are finishing and they're planning other classes at the same time. So now they need the same space for 2 different classes at the same time. So they're just really running into a logistical issue of available facilities.
But obviously not all of our summer programs are in our facilities.
Correct.
Because we have so many community partners. So at the very least, we would be able to recoup the gain that we receive as a district from those community-based programs which we help subsidize.
Yeah, the biggest one that first week is really Parks and Rec, which and a lot of that is using our facilities because they're using our pools. That's actually, they have over 160 sections just that first week.
Just of the swimming.
Right. Mostly swimming, not all 160 are that.
And have we discussed it all, or talked at all, and it's probably a huge can of worms, but with the university at all, or with the municipal pool, has there been any conversation there about if they'd be able to accommodate in any of them?
We haven't had that conversation yet, no.
Okay.
I know that they do use their facilities, though. They schedule, the Fairfax Pool schedules master swimmers in the morning, followed by the swim team in the morning, followed by their own lessons. So some other lessons as well.
So the $310,000 number, was that taking into account those programs that we have the facility hold up with, or is that really taking into account all of the programs?
That was if you had to cancel that whole first week.
Which includes so canceling the whole first week of all the programs,
Of all
including
programming,
Parks
yes.
and Rec.
Because that made the assumption that our students wouldn't be available for programming.
Right.
Or the high schoolers to work the programming.
Sure.
And I think that's actually the part of that shifting around too is a lot of the partners have already are entering into agreements with staff to run those programs. And so again, even if you were to say, could you shift from week 1 to week 4, the people that they have that are staffing it may or may not be available, that we'd have to go partner by partner to see that.
Okay. Are there any board member questions on this so far? Commissioner
So I
Harder.
mean, what I conclude from that, but tell me if I'm reading it differently than you, is rescheduling that first week sounds kind of quite problematic, but and losing just kind of writing off the week has its own issues, but not as much as trying to reschedule that week.
So the 310,000 is just for that 1 week? Yeah. Okay. Do we know how, like for average certified staff, if they lose 1 day of pay, I mean, like they put it in ASOP, they don't have any days banked, it's taken out of their paycheck?
It's going to range based upon where they're at in the salary schedule. I mean, it could, on a low end, maybe $200 a day, and on a higher end, maybe $300. You know, that's just total ballpark guess off the top of my brain.
Are there any other board member questions or board members who'd like to make a motion about one of these three and then put it on the table and discuss? Commissioner Bika.
I'd like to make a motion for option 3.
Okay. So Commissioner Bika has moved option 3. Is there a second? Would any board member like to make a second? Okay. So there's no second, so that motion dies. And we just continue the conversation. So, yeah, would a board member like to make another motion about one of the other options? And discuss. Yes, Commissioner Torres.
I would like to make a motion to combine option 1 with as many days from option 3 as needed to complete the requirements. Does that make sense?
So are you saying if there are additional snow days, they would be made up at the end of the year?
So your motion is to adopt option 1 with the stipulation that if there's additional inclement weather days, that will be made up starting June 10th on.
You're reading my mind.
Okay, okay.
Second.
So that's the motion. Charles, Commissioner Vu seconded that. Is there any discussion on that? So the motion is to approve option 1, which will schedule May 17th, have the earlier start at high school and middle school, shortened lunch at North, and then if we have an inclement weather day, we would start starting June 10th, utilize that. So is there any discussion on that from board members or the student members? Commissioner Harder?
Another way to look at that hybrid between 1 and 3 is to preemptively take, say, 2 days to minimize the effect of the early start.
So are you suggesting that we would utilize either Good Friday or one of the early days in spring break, Commissioner Harder?
No, option 3, which would be, I guess it's June 10th
so
and
you're
11th would be the first 2 available days. And I believe that would take 14, I don't know if I heard it right, would that take 14 minutes from if we had two days, that would have the amount of the start time,
So making the days longer, not to start earlier.
a little bit long, they're still going to be a little bit longer. So it's still a hybrid.
To end later, but not to begin
Yeah. So
earlier.
Yeah, this I think proposal was to start earlier and end at the same time. That's the current proposal 1, is to end earlier and start at and end at the regular time. Correct? And so what I'm saying is start a little less early, about 15 minutes less early. By that 15 minutes, by taking 2 days the June 10th and 11th.
Yeah. Okay, so so what Commissioner Harder is suggesting as a friendly amendment would mean utilizing option 1 and automatically utilizing June 10th and 11th, and then that's what I'm hearing. So would that be a friendly amendment to the mover and the seconder? So that's you and Commissioner Vu.
But that would be 10 and 11 plus any other
Plus,
additional
if it needed,
snow
yeah,
days, if needed.
Yes. Sure. Would you agree?
As a point of order, I think with the motion on the table, I think it'd be better to vote on that motion than to amend it at this point.
No, we can friendly amend. And
But
it'll
they
just.
both have to agree to
They
it.
both have to agree. That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying right now. So would you agree to it, Commissioner Torres?
Sure, we can discuss.
Okay, so if you would agree to it, that'll just have that be the different motion. So would you agree to it, Commissioner Vu?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, so the actual motion on the table at this point with the friendly amendment is to utilize option 1, automatically utilize from option 3, June 10th and 11th, and then leaving the other days of, leaving it as the default to utilize the other pieces of option 3 if we have an additional inclement weather day. So that's the motion as with the friendly amendment. I'm wondering if, I don't want to put you on the spot, Ms. Johnson, but I'm wondering.
We need to have Mr. Fye come and tell us if that's possible.
Yes.
To change that.
Yeah.
Because it could change the bus routes.
Well, and I'm wondering too, if we could figure out, if we're utilizing 2 days of that summer school, which I believe is, they don't have summer school Fridays, right?
Right.
So there would still be 2 of the 4 days for summer school available for that first week. And so then what would that mean for us as far as cost, or what we would lose?
We'd want to talk a little bit more about that because perhaps we could look at a Friday option that first week if we needed to be, but we haven't had enough chance to really think that way yet.
I also think we need to hear from Mr. Fye, because changing those bus routes may change the bus routes. So could you come and talk with us?
We were discussing some other ideas of that back there, so I missed the first.
Oh.
That what changed from was it going late, not as early as 30 minutes in the morning?
So the motion, yes, so the motion is to utilize option 1, but the other piece of the motion is to utilize June 10th and 11th also to help with the goal of offsetting how early the start is. And so you would get the 14 minutes back for those start times. So I'm wondering, what we're wondering is with that change of option 1, if we're starting, 6 minutes earlier start at middle school and 16 minutes earlier at high school or whatever, what would the cost be there? Would it be the same or would that be different?
Well, the elementary, I think going a little bit later would help. It wouldn't, there wouldn't be a huge savings, but there'd be some savings, but that gap that we have there is better. It's better to be 10 or 15 minutes than it is to be half an hour between the high school, middle school routes ending and then the elementary or really the special ed routes and the Prairie Ridge routes. That gap has to be accounted for somehow, so with less time in between, that would actually minimize or reduce the cost there. And I think that was the challenge we had, was talking about how early students would be getting on was a big concern. And then the other thing was the daylight savings on March 10th. We're finally starting to get some daylight in the morning, and then we lose that an hour. We spring ahead an hour the day before this starts. So those were all concerns that we had too, but we know the challenges, and we're trying to do whatever we can to make it work.
Thank you, Jim. Okay. Are there any other board member questions or comments on the motion, which, again, the motion is to adopt a revised option 1 using June 10th and 11th the Monday and Tuesday, and having the other days of that week be the default if there is an inclement weather day from here on out. Yes, Commissioner Humbuck-Well.
It's just open still for discussion.
Absolutely.
I guess I would need the information we need about summer school.
Which is how much it would look different by having school Monday and Tuesday.
And whether we could salvage some of that and what the cost would be.
And would you say we are almost guaranteed to have another delay or full-day closure?
Exactly.
And so I think if I'm missing something, that what you're trying to do by utilizing some of option 1 is to pick up some time before high-stakes testing, and that's it, right? Yeah.
Both high test testing and high stakes testing and remediation for students who are not performing it right now.
Right, but I don't know why that wouldn't be better achieved with full-day recovery by utilizing that week in June.
But that's at the end. The intervention needs to be earlier.
Right, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still really conflicted about how much intervention can take place by adding, those small increments of time. That's where I'm having trouble.
Any other board members have questions before we just vote on this motion? Whether we approve it or just vote on it so we can move on discussing further? Okay, seeing none, we will do a roll call vote on this motion, if that's okay.
So what, oops. So
If you have more to, yeah.
the motion is option 1, add 2 days from June, and if we would have any more snow days, we'd have to be back at the drawing board.
Right, that's the motion currently on the.
Not quite.
Okay.
June, you would add the automatic, the default through the motion would be that any additional inclement weather date you would add on to that end of the year from here on out.
Got it.
So that's the motion current.
And just so I understand correctly, the adding the minutes to recover from option 1 would have to be changed then as well with this motion? So
Yes.
we should probably put that in too.
They will be, the minutes will be, they'll reflect the additional days, so the 14 minutes that we'll get back. So instead of 30 minutes earlier, okay, it'll be 16 minutes earlier at high school under the new change. Or instead of, I can't see behind you, I'm sorry. 20 minutes, okay, so it'll change that.
I understand, but I just really think for the motion, we should have the right numbers.
Okay, do you want to read it back?
Well, that's what I'm trying to
Sure.
do. I have combined option 1, but only use 16 minutes earlier at high school.
Yep.
And use June 10 and 11 from option 3. If any additional days are needed due to additional school closures, the year would be extended past June 11th.
You should add.
And the 6 minutes earlier at middle school.
So as a clarification, Ms. Kohler, will the 16 minutes, will that make up the instructional time for the high school credits?
Let me do the math quickly. It's 2 full days plus 16 minutes. Is that what we're asking?
Right.
Okay. Yes, and it would leave a little bit of a buffer. Middle school would be how many minutes?
6 minutes.
Okay.
So when you say a little bit of a buffer, how much of a buffer?
For Memorial, it would be 1 day for North. So then the other, I guess, question on the table is North reducing lunch by 5 minutes to make up for that power outage day, or not? If that's the case, then if North also made up those 5 minutes during the lunch period, this would be 4.28 days made up for both schools. So we would have a 1.28 day buffer.
Okay.
And then middle school, 6 minutes would also, well, let me double check that. Did you do that, Abby? Oh, 6 minutes is not a full day. So,
Oh.
8 to 10.
8 minutes earlier at middle school is what you're saying?
So 8
Okay.
minutes would allow a full day.
Okay.
So as a point of clarification, would those days in June be used for professional development?
We would need the instructional minutes.
For elementary?
For elementary, we do not need the instructional minutes.
So those would be used as professional development days for the elementary teachers? And the middle and the high school teachers and students would be in class?
And I'm hearing that this other aspect of I think the motion currently says 6 minutes earlier at middle school, and it would need to be 8 to make up a full day. So would the mover and seconder accept a 6-minute modification as opposed to 8? I mean, I'm sorry, an 8 as opposed to 6 as a friendly amendment to make up that day, which is Commissioner Torres and Commissioner Wu?
Sure.
Yeah? Yes? Okay.
But can I?
Yes, Commissioner Harder.
Yeah, just to ask, we have an extra day of buffer that this calculates out to. Does that mean we don't necessarily need to pre-allocate the 11th of June? We can reserve it as, you know, if we do have another day, we'll use it, as we've said, but.
Middle school does not have a full day buffer.
Okay.
High schools.
High school would have a full day buffer. Elementary school would have at least a full day buffer, but middle school would not.
Okay.
Just because of the differences in the number of minutes.
Do we gain anything, or is it even, or does it make it worse to not plan to have high school that on the 11th? To not convene it and just do middle school on the 11th? I think gains things and gain something particularly in terms of helping with our summer school.
I think we need a little bit of time to calculate.
Yeah, no problem.
While calculating, can I ask, what's the length of the lunch period at North?
With the 5-minute reduction? Is that what you're saying?
Well, without,
Oh.
either way. What is it typically?
It's 30 minutes.
It's, yeah, with a 6-minute transition to lunch. So bell to bell would be 36 minutes. In other words, the bell rings for class to end. They have 6 minutes to get to lunch. Then they have 30 minutes to eat. Shift A and C have 6 minutes on each side, but Shift B does not.
Is there, by shortening, does that jeopardize anyone's access to food?
We did talk with the new food and nutrition director, and they did not feel that shortening it by 5 minutes would have an impact on getting the students served.
Okay. Commissioner Humbuckler.
I just have a comment too. We still have a shortage, are we still experiencing a shortage of subs in the district?
Yes.
So, you know, I just want to make a comment about option 2. And why I haven't really touched that one is because I know that is something that we experience every day.
Right.
And I know that there would be a high incidence of subs needed that day, not just for in the classroom, but I think administratively as well. I have a concern about the safety of our kids relative to that many subs and what the district would experience that day, so I just wanted to quantify that.
I appreciate that,
Thank
Commissioner Well, because I think if you look at it in a black and white way without understanding the costs involved and the difficulty that we have as a district right now in getting subs, I think that might look like a cut and dry proposal. But the other aspect of it is looking at what areas in our district are most difficult to get subs.
Exactly.
And those are the areas with the most at-risk populations of students and the populations that require the most attention during the day. So, you're talking, we every single year, and when I have conversations with the special education department, special education substitutes, that's a very difficult position to fill. So, yeah, I do also concur with you that we would be potentially putting students at risk and not meeting those basic needs. So, because we already sometimes have a hard time doing that in an average day, just with the difficulty of finding subs right now. So, I guess, and thank you for being patient with us, Secretary Everson, in our Frankenstein motion. Would you be so kind to read that just so that we have it?
Yep. Combine option 1, but start 16 minutes earlier at high schools and 8 minutes earlier at middle schools, and use June 10 and 11 for instructional time from option 3. North would still shorten lunch by 5 minutes March 11th through June 7th. If any days are needed due to additional school closures going forward, the year would be extended past June 11th.
Thank you, Secretary Iverson. Are there other board member comments or questions before we vote on this proposal? Okay. Seeing none, then we'll do a, did anyone, any last minute comments, questions?
It's
Yes,
a terrible
Commissioner.
compromise.
I
Terrible
agree.
compromise.
Well, they're all bad options, so it's identifying the least bad option. I mean, but doing what we have to do. So I do want to also say this. I called DPI personally, spoke with their administrators and one of their administrators in the operations department, and she said that their leadership team, within their leadership team, they've discussed that it's highly unlikely that any waiver would be approved. And that such a waiver has never been approved before. So I basically, because I called her and I said, if we requested a waiver, if we were to fill out that process, would it be worth our time or yours? And she said no. So heard that from DPI directly. So we're dealing with a relatively inflexible system as it relates to this. So, all right. Seeing no other comments, questions, we will call the roll, please.
Commissioner Luganbill?
Yes.
Commissioner Torres?
Yes.
Commissioner Vu?
Yes.
Commissioner Bika?
No.
Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle?
Yes.
And Commissioner Harder?
Yes.
Thank you. So that carries 6-1. And I think that one of the things that Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle, you spoke about early in this was the need to plan proactively for next year and what we should look at. And one of the things that I can't help but think about is year-round school. And it's something that I've talked about before. And issues like this, where we're having to patchwork these things, that could really help with that. But also, it's proven to benefit students. So that might be something that we look at in the near future that potentially could have been prodded along its process by this situation. So, but I want to thank everybody who has worked on the inclement weather days, whether that's our staff who've come in or the folks who, I know that Larry Sommerfeld was on a vacation, but on the phone with our superintendent and others, and I know our superintendent and student transit, these folks have been working really hard. And the last thing I want to say is there was an op-ed about toughness and us having snow days is potentially not being tough enough. And I would just say that every single cancellation or delay that we have had has been totally warranted. And it's not just considering the students who live in district, who are living in the city limits, but we cover 200 square miles. And that's really something that weighs heavily on the administrators and also student transit to make sure that we're keeping our students safe. So I want to thank those folks again for all of their work. And that brings us then to our Revenue Committee proposal number 1.
All right, so on behalf of the Revenue Committee, I am excited to bring forth the first proposal that the committee has reviewed and asked us to bring it to the board. I first wanted to go through who the committee members were. So Commissioner Luganbill and Commissioner Harder from the school board are representatives on behalf of the board. Ms. Miner from Lakeshore is an admin representative. And then our community members are Tiffany Tibbetts, Paul Ganrud, Angela Ekman, Nikki Kurth, Dan Shuda, Timothy Davis, Amy Reinhardt, and Jeff Mosner. As you can see, we have stars next to Dan Shuda, Tim Davis, Amy Reinhardt, and Jeff Mosner because they have resigned their committee appointment. And so one of the things that the board might want to keep in mind is that our committee started out with 11 members and now we're down to 7. We have struggled getting a consistent meeting time that we've been able to get a quorum. And so one of the first questions that the committee had wanted me to bring to your attention is perhaps we need to identify some additional members since we've had 4 resign for whatever reasons. The committee charge is to explore potential innovative revenue streams for the district. So coming with that is our first proposal, which is called an ECASD reward card. The ECASD reward card is actually the concept of an affinity card. An affinity card is similar to a co-branded card that 2 organizations, usually one a financial institution and a nonprofit, come together to issue a card that benefits both of them. Co-branded cards are usually issued by for-profit institutions, but affinity cards is what's known in the nonprofit world. We've seen this, and the committee investigated this. It's a popular option on the East and West Coasts, and they're currently being used by universities and school districts. Some samples of what the cards could look like and ones that we found were just different ones that look like this. So there were some that just had one logo for the entire district, and in the middle you can see that I have several different cards because that's all one district, but each school had its own logo. How is the revenue generated? The district would usually get a one-time flat rate donation each time a new card is opened, and in addition they would earn a percentage of the purchases made. Sometimes the donations when you're starting out could be small, but they can also benefit the district because increased visibility as you're using the card and awareness for support for the district and its mission. The amounts for the flat rate donation and the percentages would be dependent upon the financial institution's preference. The goal of the Revenue Committee with this proposal number 1, the first year that the partnership is offered, the goal would be to get 500 to 1,000 cards with our current community members. If they were to spend an average of $10,000 per year, the revenue generated could range between $50,000 and $100,000, assuming the financial would provide a 1% reward back to the district. If they were to decrease that reward and make it be 0.5%, there could be additional revenue of $25,000 to $50,000. And you can see in year 2, the proposal would be to increase the number of cards in year 3. This would not be just a 3-time cycle. This would be something that would be sustainable and be actually looking at growing that number each year. Some reasons why we would want to promote a reward card is that the spending of the donated funds that come back would be determined by the school board. It would be put into the operating fund with direction from the board on how to use those funds. Also provides an opportunity for early education for philanthropy. It's potentially another way to stay connected with alumni and a way for them to support our district. And it's also a new idea in the Eau Claire community. Some considerations that the Revenue Committee had was it's an easy way to donate to the district. Anyone who is interested in supporting the district can look at getting a card, and they can show their support for the ECASD by opening that. This proposal and program mirrors the former Target Take Charge of Education program. You may or may not have been familiar with that, but it used to be if you used your Target card at Target or other places, you could designate a charity to give your percent back to, and that just happened, and Target discontinued that program about a year ago, and so that was one of the models that the committee looked at. It's also less time and effort than collecting milk caps and box tops, and has a potential for earning additional revenue above and beyond what a milk caps and box tops collection does. And ECASD would be the entity that would choose a partner in order to offer this rewards card. You might ask, what's the incentive for the bank or a financial to support? It could give them increased volume. It's free marketing for their financial institution. Again, could provide a long-term base of customers. It's promoting stewardship in the district community. It's also fostering community partners. The breadth of opportunity is wide and creating brand loyalty. Items that the committee would like to put into an RFP if the board approves that as our next step. These are the things that we've talked about and would include in an RFP from a financial institution. We would ask about introductory rates. What our interest rates look like? What would the percentage donation back to the district be? Are there incentives for the card holders? What types of cards are offered? Is it only a credit card, or would they offer a credit and a debit card? What do the marketing materials and distribution look like? What's their commitment to promoting this rewards card on behalf of the district? Is there a transition plan for somebody that doesn't want to have two cards, and so if they want to move from a current card to an ECASD reward card, what does that look like from the financial end? The length of the contract. This isn't something that the Revenue Committee would request that you look at every single year, looking for a long-term partnership, maybe a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. And then we would also ask about the card design, and can we have a district logo versus each school having their own logo. All of these are things that we've already talked about putting into an RFP, and if there were other things, we would take that into consideration as well. The picture up here, as you can see, is an advertisement that we found for the reward card sample on one of the sites, and this is one that the bank is doing, and they have the picture of the little guy with the backpacks, and I don't know that you can read it, but it says back to school shopping and year-round rewards. And so the committee thought that was actually kind of a cute thing and shared that that could be modeled if we were given the permission to move forward with an RFP. So with that, I wonder if the board has questions or comments about the committee's first recommendation.
Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle.
I just have, what would our, do we have initial costs or any costs that are attached to this to start out with?
No, we would put that into the RFP, that we would ask the financial institution what, if any, startup costs, and we would ask that they would take care of that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say the Revenue Committee was very excited to bring this to the board. And also there's already been chatter in the community about it, and we've received calls from financial institutions and people who would like to learn more. So I think that's really exciting. And this is the first revenue proposal from the Revenue Committee, mostly because it's one of the easiest, but it accomplishes a number of things. It provides a pretty automatic and seamless revenue stream for the district with very little additional work or staff time. It provides an opportunity for a financial institution to partner with the district, and also to provide a card for families that through an RFP process could have an advantageous interest rate or other things as a part of that card or part of that rewards program that might be competitive with other financial institutions. And it would, of course, provide an opportunity for anyone in the community to celebrate their school pride and school spirit with the cards, as you saw by the examples. So, and I think we'd be one of the first districts anywhere in the state to be doing this. So that's another exciting opportunity for us. So I would certainly strongly recommend that we move forward with the RFP process for this. Are there any other comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner Harder.
Yeah, I've had some longer time to look at this as well, being on the Revenue Committee, and I agree it's pretty much pure upside as far as we can tell, and it'd be very interesting for me to see what kind of revenue we can generate from this.
I move, can I make a motion?
Yes.
I move to move forward with the RFP.
Thank you, Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, we have a second from Commissioner Bika. Any other discussion on it? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
And that takes us then to, oh yeah, you get to stay up there, to our first committee report and item for discussion, which is a timeline for the employee engagement plan and further OPEB and budgetary study.
Okay, so tonight, this is kind of an updated presentation and really talking about where we've been regarding OPEB over the last several years and specifically the last 18 months. And so we wanted to go back to where have we been, what has the board been asked to do, and what are our next steps. This discussion and the alignment to the strategic plan really centers around the high quality staff piece because this is a benefit that the staff is currently receiving. If we talk about our previous OPEB discussions, I have several dates up here on the calendar, and it's important to revisit with the board because we have a very different board than we had at many points in time for this, and so some of you wouldn't have been on the board when these topics were initially discussed. So way back in July of 2004, the stipend was negotiated away, and that was to add funds to the salary schedule for the certified staff and also the non-affiliated staff. In July 2008, 2010, and 2012, depending on which employee group you fell under, the defined contribution, which is the current retirement benefit, was added, and that was negotiated in lieu of the OPEB benefit. September 24th, 2012, there was an initial proposal about OPEB benefits, and the current benefits that are out there was reviewed. On November 19th of 2012, the school board asked for more information. December of 2013, the school board wanted to continue looking at modifications. And then it was temporarily put on hold because we were doing a little thing called the compensation study. And as you will remember, that study took us a couple of years, and so the board at that time opted to get a compensation schedule in place and then come back to the OPEB discussion. On February 1st, 2016, the school board discussed concerns from employees about immediate OPEB changes. In November of 2016, Budget Development decided that OPEB was a top budget priority. And then in December of 2016, the current Budget Development Administration and actuaries since that time have been working on scenarios for the current OPEB plan. The timeline presented here is specifically related to health and dental that was presented to the school board since the 2012 school year. There's currently approximately 650 members. Actually, 650 of our employees have this current benefit. This is a tough subject for each school board because no one wants to take anything away, but it does continue to be part of the discussion because of the value and the impact that it has on our budget. When we look at historical perspectives, these benefits used to be negotiated. The benefits increase could have been negotiated in lieu of a salary increase. Health insurance was also less costly when these benefits were initially negotiated. When these benefits were negotiated, there was never any funds set aside. So we don't have a savings account to pay for these benefits, and each year it's impactful to our budget. And each year we need to find money in our budget to pay for these benefits. So as you can see up on the board, you can see that in 2014-15, $6.7 million of our budget went for OPEB benefits. In 15-16, it decreased a little bit to $6.3 million. Then it went to about $6 million, was about $100,000 different for 17-18. And then we got to 18-19, and we had an increase of $880,000 to this year's budget. It can be very challenging for us to accurately predict what is that number going to look like because we don't know for sure what our health and dental rates are going to be for the following year, and we also don't know for sure who is retiring when we need to start those calculations. So I think it's really important to remind the board that the benefits were negotiated, we didn't put money set aside, and each year we need to make good on those benefits that were offered. And that is why the Budget Development Committee chose to review the benefits to see if there's some options to either come up with a fixed cost or a way to reduce the yearly expense and impact our budget going forward. So this slide that I'm sharing tonight, we shared this at Budget Development last week, and it was shared multiple times. December 3rd was probably the most recent time that this is one of the slides that was shared. And this slide was talked about specifically because who are we competing against in our area for staff members, and what do their OPEB benefits look like? So as you can see, in Eau Claire, we currently spend $787 on the OPEB expense. And this is from the 2017 school year. That's the latest data that we have available. We're comparing ourselves to the school districts that they would be competing for staff. As you can see, Eau Claire is $787 on average is what we're paying for that benefit. You can see that line in the middle that says $288 is what the average of our in this county the local schools are spending. Again, at the bottom of my graph, you can say if we spent the average of this group, this Eau Claire School District would save approximately $5.6 million. Now I want to turn this over to the document camera and show the rest of the slides from the December 3rd, 2018 budget development that was spoken about at public comment. And Patty, here's where I'm going to need your help. The reference to the $3.6 million and the $2 million difference was because we were comparing a different data point set. So this is the slide from the December 3rd, 2018 budget development. And you can see Eau Claire was at 787, just the same as in the previous document I just showed you. But you can see from this group, we're looking at the top 10 school districts. So we're comparing ourselves to Kenosha, Milwaukee, Sheboygan, Janesville, and Racine. Those are, in addition to Eau Claire, the ones in the top 10 school that we can get information on. If we were to compare ourselves and spend at the average of these districts of $461, that net cost savings would be $3.6 million. That was what was referenced during the public comment today. And one more comparison that I shared with budget development in December at that same time was if we compared ourselves to UW schools. These are three common areas that we compare ourselves, and we're specifically looking at OPEB to see how do we compare to those schools. Again, you can see Eau Claire was not the top one this time. They were $787 still, the same number in each of these slides. Menominee was actually higher than us at this point in time. Menominee has made changes to their plan, so I expect that this will be reduced over the next few years. But again, the average of this group spending is $479. If we were to extrapolate the difference, that's $3.9 million in comparison to what we're currently spending. Okay, thank you. So if we talk about the current defined contribution retirement benefit, this is going to be applicable to all employees that were hired by a certain date. So if I'm in the hourly group, this went into effect in 2010 or 2012, whatever year it was negotiated. If I'm a certified staff member, this is after 2008. And if I'm an administrator, it's also after 2008. We kind of broke it down into the three different categories of benefits that they receive when they retire. So the defined contribution is paid for by the district. If I'm in the hourly group, my maximum that I can get is $15,000. If I'm a certified staff member and I retire at age 56 and I've got 30 years in the district and I've earned a defined contribution for those 30 years, that gives me $75,000 in my defined contribution account. And if I'm an administrator that was hired after 2008, the maximum that I have in that account is $25,000. There's a big difference because what was negotiated for hourly and administrators was a 5-year contribution at $3,000 a year for 5 years or $5,000 a year for 5 years, and that's why that's different. The certified group was the one that negotiated $2,500 for each year of service. The stipend, if you will recall from earlier, that went away in 2004. And if I'm an hourly staff person, I wouldn't have gotten a stipend anyways, but that did go away for the certified and the administrators groups that were hired after 2008, 10, or 12, depending on my group. And then if I add in WRS, which is again another piece of the retirement benefit, that amount, if I'm age 56, and I'm going to assume that I worked for 30 years and my average life expectancy is 79 years, the value is going to range from $380,000 to $1.1 million. That's solely because WRS is based upon the years of service and the 3 highest years of salary that I earned. So this is this is really just to share, because we get the question, what is the total benefit? And the OPEB piece is just one piece of the benefit that a retiree receives. This is what it looks like if I'm hired in the Eau Claire School District today. If I look at...
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Can I just
Commissioner
ask
Herter.
a clarifying question about that slide?
Sure.
So this is, and I just want to make sure I'm reading it right. So these are the totals under hourly, for example, that represents the post-retirement total cost for one employee, as sort of averaged, estimated?
I don't know that I would call it total cost, but estimated retirement benefit.
Right, yes.
Correct.
The amount paid by the district for that.
The WRS would have been, that's paid by the Wisconsin Retirement System. The
Oh.
district did contribute to that as
Yes.
well as the employee. But that's the value of what we estimated that monthly income over the course of the average age from 56 to 79
And
would
so
be.
this does not include the OPEB benefits of either
This is what it looks like today,
Yeah.
based upon today's benefit system.
Okay.
Okay? If it, we can come back to it if we need to.
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay. So if we look at our current plan is very much dependent upon which health and dental plan that I currently take with the district. And so we broke this down into the 3 different plans and by the groups, because there is a difference based upon the group that you fall in when you're looking at the total retirement benefits. And again, I want to stress that OPEB is one piece of the retirement benefit, and that is why we continue to look at it. Again, we have about 650 employees who fall under this benefit and are still tied to the unpredictability of the OPEB plan, because we don't know currently what next year's health and dental is going to look like and how do we project that going forward for the next 30 years. So based upon today's rates, the health and dental, if I'm an hourly employee that carries a single benefit plan, you can see it's the same across the board. It's almost $80,000 if I'm in the hourly group. It's almost $80,000 if I'm in the certified, and almost $80,000 because I'm an administrator. And then the WRS numbers are exactly the same as what I showed you on the previous slide, because the WRS is calculated on my 3 highest years of employment and the length of employment. And it is very dependent upon how much money I've earned as a Wisconsin retirement employee.
Can I just make a comment about the WRS?
Sure.
I just, as we put this information out, I think people in this room may understand WRS and that it is a fully funded retirement system, whereas it isn't necessarily that way in other states. Sure. And I just want to make that fact clear, that it is a fully funded state retirement system.
Right.
One of the few in the country.
Sure. Yep, and I think that's a really good point. And this, again, we've got asked a lot of questions about what does the retirement package look like and all of these pieces. And there's some misinformation out there in our community about the fact that, well, I have a retired teacher who's now 70 years old and they make more money than I do. And so they're not separating out what's a district benefit from a WRS benefit. And so that was another reason why we included the differentiation in our presentation, was just to be very transparent that the OPEB piece is just one piece of a retirement benefit. If we compare that to an Employee Plus plan, you can see what's different is the health and dental piece. And so hourly jumps, the whole health and dental piece jumps from about an $80,000 benefit to about a $170,000 benefit. The reason for that difference, again, because it's tied to health and dental and what plan I'm retiring with, the premiums for an Employee Plus plan cost more than the premiums for a single plan. The one thing I forgot to talk about on the last slide was the stipend, and you can see that the numbers are exactly the same, is that the hourly staff do not have a stipend at all. And if I'm a certified staff member, again, that retirement stipend is based upon retiring at age 55 and that I've taught in the district for 30 years. And the same thing for administrators. I'm retiring at age 55 and have 30 years of experience. And again, those are tied to salary schedules and expectations, and so that's why there's a variance in the amount of that benefit for those groups.
And as far as the WRS too is, I just want to comment that the amount that a retired person in a educator, whatever, would get per month can vary depending on the market. So depending on what it looks like, you can take a very big cut in your retirement because of how the system works. So it's the number of people that are in that retirement system that allow us to smooth and to add and to smooth out. So it isn't the same amount depending on how it changes with the economy. Okay.
We use the WRS calculator based upon 3 highest average years of salary, the years that you had worked for the district, to come up with these. So again, my numbers are just for examples based upon
I just want people to understand the system.
Right. And then finally, looking at the comparison to the family plan. And so now you can see from a single plan, that benefit was about $80,000, an employee plus plan about $170,000, and now for a family plan it's $206,000. And so there is some significant difference when you look at that total line, and it's because these plans are tied to the health and dental piece. One of the questions that we've gotten a lot is, well, why should it be different? Because we're a teacher. Let's say I'm a teacher and the person next to me is a teacher. We both worked for 30 years, but my benefit's greater because I have a family plan, and it's different because the person next to me has a single plan. Is that really equitable? We talked a lot about that during budget development and through the listening sessions. And so I think we continue to get that feedback and that question, and what is the district's responsibility to providing that benefit? And should an employee's benefit be valued on which health and dental plan that they had when they retired? So I can't answer that question, but I wanted to be transparent and let you know that it had been asked. If I put all 3 on the same slide, you can see the ranges for the hourly group for the single compared to the family, the certified compared to the single plan compared to a family plan, and then again administrator. Again, Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle, I will reiterate your point that the WRS amount is very much just an estimate at this point in time based upon 30 years of service and what a potential salary would be for the highest 3 years. Each situation is going to be different, but I needed to be able to share, what it potentially could look like. But it's not inflating the numbers because it's the same all the way across the board.
I just want to provide some context.
Mm-hmm.
And
Commissioner
just further to that, so just this slide is these are pre-2008, all these 3, right? And we're talking about, again, just a total amount post-retirement that the employee might expect to receive given averages. Yeah.
Yes, that is correct.
Including OPEB plus WRS.
Yep, and if they were eligible for a stipend as well. So it would be the health and dental piece, a
Plus
stipend piece, and WRS.
Okay.
I just want to make a comment towards the beginning too, just a little context. When you showed the slides at the beginning, as far as just looking at the OPEB benefits, and ours came out at $787 or whatever it was, I always think it's helpful when you compare to other districts, whether they're university districts or whatever, to also put salaries next to that, because oftentimes, we don't negotiate anymore, but we negotiated more in benefits than in salary. So if you put Eau Claire up salary-wise, and we've looked at this data, we do not come out at the top. We're more mid or lower than that just because of and I want to put that in perspective as well. So we do have quite, maybe up towards the top, but we took that instead of salary. And so thank you.
So initial options that were presented to the board way back in April of 2018, there were 3 scenarios that were presented at that point in time. And so scenario A, which you will remember in Tier 1, that was the grandfather clause. It was a proposal of a 5-year grandfather with no changes. The Tier 2, the factor that was taken based upon your age and years of service ranged from 0.8 to 2.25. And then over 30 years, that projected a $42 million savings. When we looked at scenario B, that grandfather term was reduced to 3 years. The factor rates went from 0.7 to 2.0, and that estimated a cost savings of $50 million over 30 years. And then we went to scenario C, which was more like the current defined contribution benefit that staff receive today. And there was no grandfather and no factor. It was just a flat $2,500 per year of service. And that was going to generate a $58 million savings over 30 years. We had a timeline when we presented those options, and this was presented to the board at the same time. And so, to refresh your memory, on April 18th of 2018 was that initial presentation of the 3 scenarios. The board asked for some additional information, and we presented again on May 7th. And then on May 21st, we presented this timeline of where we'd been and where we could potentially look forward to. July 11th through the 19th, we held listening sessions. And then from July, I think we provided an update to the board on those listening sessions, and we had some more listening sessions in September. In October, we provided an additional update to the school board with additional information that was gained from those listening sessions. And we had said all along, December 2018 needs to be a target date for a decision to allow enough staff time to think about making a decision if there was going to be a change to OPEB. We talked at multiple budget developments and as well in front of the board that March 1st was a critical date, and that March 1st date was because that's when certified staff members need to turn in a retirement notice. And so I know over the course of the last couple of weeks there's been a lot of questions about this presentation tonight and how does that impact the July 2019 OPEB, and do I need to make a decision on retiring or not? And just wanted to remind the board that this was our initial timeline that was presented way back in May, shooting with a decision in December of 2018, and that's why it's highlighted yellow. So when we came back and presented that additional information after the first rounds, I think this information was presented in May of 2018, there was an additional scenario that was talked about. And so we got some additional information. So I added to my chart the scenario B1, and that was asked for from some additional information from the board, and that had a grandfather clause of 5 years. And then that also increased the tiered factor from a 1.0 to a 2.0 because we don't want to give our current employees, our long-term employees, less than what our current employees receive. And by doing that, that projected about a $53 million savings over 30 years. And we did talk a little bit about that at the listening sessions, but not formally because of the fact that we presented the same information that the board received on April 18th. And if you will remember, the most common opinion from the listening session was no change. I think we heard that at each listening session, and I think feedback that came out of that. Then in December of 2018, there were 3 additional options that were discussed with the school board. Option 1 was that modified scenario B1 that had been talked about in May of 2018. Another option that was presented in December was capping the health and dental rates at the 18-19 rate with a 0% increase. What that did was it froze in the rates that, and it also gave us the sustainability factor that we were looking for because we knew what the rates were going to be locked in at. And then option 3 that was presented was no changes to the OPEB for July 1st, 2019. And at that board meeting, the board postponed voting on any of these options to conduct an employee engagement plan. So then we worked on some responses, and so tonight I'm here to present those to you. At that December 18th meeting, the school board suggested a multi-month employee engagement plan to review OPEB. We need to be very careful that we do not give any appearance of negotiations. While the school board can ask for staff participation and staff voice, the school board must make the final decision. The school board and the ECAE union can only negotiate on base wage, not on salary, benefits, hours, and working conditions. And in order to meet that criteria, our recommendation would be to make sure we're soliciting members from all of our staff in this potential committee that the board is looking at. We've put together a potential committee makeup, and so I wanted to share that with the board tonight. We would ask for 1 employee from each work site. We'd want a representative sample of administrators, certified staff, and hourly employees. Of those 22 members, we would look for a minimum of 4 non-affiliated staff, a minimum of 6 certified staff, a minimum of 6 hourly staff, and a minimum of 6 non-OPEB affected staff. It's important to have them around the table as well, because not having this benefit is still impacting their budget and how we operate as a school district. So it's important to have their voices heard as well. The administrative team liaison would be myself and Ms. Marks. And then the committee would act in an advisory capacity to the school board, and coming again back to the fact that the school board would make the final decision on any recommendations. Some other questions that we had for the school board was time is money. Administration spent a lot of time presenting options approved by the Budget Development Committee. Each time we go back to the actuary, there's a cost for that, and asking for different scenarios. The longer no decision is made, the longer it takes to see that budget impact due to the changes. We also have a school board election that's coming up on April 2nd. And so April 22nd, we would have a new school board taking office. We currently have 4 candidates running for 3 open positions. So we know for sure there will be 1 new member, but there could be 2 new members. What does that re-education process look like? Do you want new members to take on this topic, which has been studied at length by the current board? Do we want to continue to kick the decision for OPEB down the road? Some things that we need board direction on. What are the target dates for the committee appointment, the charge to the committee meeting dates, and how soon would they be scheduled? When would the school board like a first report? Is there listening sessions expected, and the number? When does the school board want the final report? And when do we anticipate a final school board decision? Again, keeping in mind that we're going to have new school board member or members on April 22nd, and our staffing and our OPEB budgets are due mid-May. Timeline is very important here, and so we want to stress what does that look like from the school board standpoint. Going back to, these are the most important questions that we need answered tonight so we can know how to move forward. But what is the charge? Is there a targeted savings? Is there a time period to recognize that savings? And what resources are going to be needed to support the committee? When we talk about what is the time period needed to recognize the savings, many of the options didn't provide a budget savings until 5 to 7 years down the road. So again, if we continue to delay a decision, we're just delaying any budget impact that much further. What kind of questions are there for the committee to answer? What's the school board's role in participating in the committee? What specific feedback does the school board want? Do you want multiple options to look at again? And again, what's that timeline for the decision? This will help administration be able to move forward with the process. And I know it seems kind of repetitive, but those are some burning questions in our mind as well. So tonight, I guess really what I'd like for you to discuss is the committee charge, the committee structure, and a committee timeline, because that'll help us get the process going.
Do you have more in the presentation, or is this is the end? Okay.
This is the end.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Commissioner Humbuck-Well.
I really think this would be something that the board should tackle in a work session. There's a lot of parameters here, and I think we need some quality time to really spend on this, not just board discussion here for, well, maybe we could for the next couple hours, maybe.
You want a work session about what you want the committee to look at?
Well, there's a lot of questions here for the board,
Sure.
you know, and the charge and information that we need, and I find it difficult to sit here tonight and look at this and really think that we would. I'd like to take this home and think about it and think about what I would like to, questions I have, and then come back and just have a real quality work session on what we're going to do here. I don't know, that's just a suggestion.
Yeah. Commissioner Harder.
Well, I'm in favor of that idea, and I do feel like these are great questions about OPEB, and I do, though, had always kind of considered this as something a bit broader in scope, this engagement question, because, you know, when we talk about the 80% of people costs versus the 20% of other costs, and we are, you know, understandably concerned about touching that 80%, but realizing it's looking more increasingly likely there's no alternative. And the question then is, what shape does that take, and what size does it take? the question of what size is up to the board. The question of shape is up to the board. But from my perspective, I'd like to understand better staff preference on shape and start to have this conversation at a higher level of, well, as soon as possible, we're talking about a target number. And now we can start talking about forms that number could take with the staff. So again, I see this a bit more holistically. I used that term before. I think raised some questions, question marks about what I meant by it. But that's what I meant, is a little bit broader than OPEB. Certainly OPEB is a central question, but it's not the only question about how we might touch that 80%.
So, taking in both of your comments, my thought is we know that we want a committee. I'm wondering if board members feel the need to discuss in more detail about who is on that committee, or if the meat and potatoes of what we want in a work session is more about the charge of the committee that we put together, and the parameters and the time frame of the work and all of that, which I agree we can't figure all of that out tonight. So I'm wondering if the board would be agreeable to allowing me and Vice President Harder to work with the administration to advertise for members of the committee and have a roster put together by the next board meeting. And at that time, we could have a work session as a major part of that meeting. We can also vote to formally appoint those members and form that committee at the meeting along with its charge. That just by putting that in motion, though, it just keeps us on track. But I think it still accomplishes what you're both seeking. And then we could at least have a committee in place by the next meeting with those details also. Would that be agreeable to folks? And I'm wondering if maybe we could go to that slide about the makeup of the committee. Personally, that seems fine to me. But if board members have any changes to that as far as who they would like, what kind of makeup they would like to see, it would be good to get that now. But my thinking is we could, at the very least, advertise that the board will be forming a committee and advertise for membership. Even if it's not specified as far as the exact charge, people are going to know what this is about, and we can state it in a basic sense. And then we could have, by the March 18th board meeting, approve the roster, approve a charge, and we could structure the meeting in a way that we could have the work session before voting on things, so we can really discuss things and revise things. Would that be okay with members? Commissioner Hambuck?
I think so. You know, when I look at the list for employee members of the committee, the only thing I think about is I never had a home for I don't know how many years after, before I left. I was itinerant, and I don't know if that's a separate group of people, but they do have a different perspective. Yeah, they're certified staff, but a little bit different on how they do their job. So I'm not sold on that. I just wanted to throw that out there for people to be aware. That's all.
So, I mean, and I think that if board members are okay with us moving forward with trying to identify stakeholders before the next meeting, so we at least have a good idea for you and we can move forward with that, I think we could certainly be on the lookout for that. And I think it would be good to talk with each building principal about who would you like to, who are folks at your building that you really think we should talk to. But I think the other part of this that I think is really important is it's not specified here, but I think that we will, through our process of identifying people, to make sure that we have not only veteran people, but also some new ideas and new faces, because often you get all the same players with these kinds of discussions, and of course we value those voices and we want them there, but we also want different ideas too, because I think that we get in kind of get tunnel vision when we're talking to the same groups, and so just making sure that we're really thoughtful about having both. Dr. Harbeck.
I think too we could advertise in the district update this Friday, and maybe with the idea of by the following Friday, people could apply if they were interested.
Sure.
And open up the membership a little bit that way.
I think that's good. Okay, so our board members okay with that process? We'll work on getting a roster put in place, and I'll work with Vice President Harder and administrators on that, and then we will bring that to you at the next meeting along with work session and the ability at that meeting to get the committee rolling with a charge and some more specificity. And in the now this is on board docs, so board members will have the time to read this as well in more detail. So, anything else on this one from the board? Okay, anyone? Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
I do like that idea. I just wanted to briefly see if we can explicitly address the notion of expanding the scope of this. No, the board may not be in favor of that idea. Obviously, I just said I was, and I hope I made the reasons clear that looking at this a bit more holistically beyond OPEB, there are a variety of changes that we could make to that 80%. I believe it's important, if we're going to engage staff properly, to look a bit more broadly than just OPEB. So the question is, I guess I would put that in front of the board in some form or another. I don't know that we have to answer it tonight, but.
Well, no, I mean, if you have those thoughts or ideas, I think it would be good to maybe flesh those out a little bit more in your head or write something down and then bring it to the work session before we specify exactly the charge. I mean, bring those things to the work, yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson.
So I was just thinking that if we're going to advertise the committee
Right.
in membership, I mean, I think we would need to be clear that, you know, if that's the desire, then it's not just specifically related to OPEB, but maybe it's specific to the 80% of the salary and fringe line of our budget.
Well, that's exactly why I bring it up, because as we solicit membership, I think one charge versus another would make a difference.
Well, and I think on it, I mean, I'm going off of the motion that the board had unanimously approved back 3 months ago or whatever, that outlined why we wanted to do employee engagement, which was regarding these topics. So, I mean, if we wish to expand it, I think we could discuss it at that meeting. But I think that we will probably want to discuss it in that meeting in the context of as potentially a follow-up, because I would be hesitant personally. I mean, we can discuss it at the next meeting, but I'd be hesitant to put too much on their plate as far as things to study or bring to us with a pretty short turnaround time. Or, I mean, at least what I would think we would want, which is, you know, you would have several months of working on it or a couple months of working on it and then bring some initial ideas to us. So
I agree.
I would want it to be easy enough in that sense to focus the group.
Yeah, no, I mean, OPEB on its own is a big enough scope,
Right.
Don't get me wrong, but I'm just concerned about looking at it in isolation.
Right. Oh, I agree. Okay. Commissioner Humboldt-Boyle.
I have one question about bids out for health and dental. Where is that at?
We'll be providing an update to the board at the next board meeting, March 18th.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
It'll all be at the table on the same night, so that'll be good. Any other board yeah, Commissioner Vu.
I want to reiterate that I agree with Commissioner Harder. I think this issue of OPEC should not just be seen as the problem alone. If we were to quickly come to a committee to find solution to that, we know that there is not going to be a solution that quick. Sure. We will just buy time. That's all we did. That's all we are going to be doing. So I would say that we want to look at the 80% that is the biggest impact of expense in the district. And that committee itself may have to work closely with the revenue committee, plus the way we budget every year. I think all those three things need to be taken into account, and we may not be able to do a solution, to come up with a solution by July 19, sure. But we have to have a working group with the bigger picture so that we don't create a bubble for the future board to resolve because it's easy for us just to vote now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We need to look at the big picture. We have to balance wanting to do that with also wanting to have a structured and focused committee as far as the short term. So I think it's a both situation. And the other consideration, I know it was up on the slide, is with the new board members piece, and that is really important to consider, because we will have it will be a new board regardless of how many new members, and I think that will be one of the things that this board will have to be really intentional about, is bringing those other board members, whether it's one or new, up to speed. Because I remember when I first joined the board in 2015, the board was finishing the end of its compensation study groups. And so as a very new board member, I had to vote on this totally new compensation plan. But that took, I mean, hours of meeting with Dan Vandewater and the president at the time and others. So we'll have to be, regardless of how quick or how slow this takes, those new members will be involved with this. So we'll just have to make sure that we put together some things and are really intentional about getting them up to speed. So, okay.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Yes.
So I think too, what I'm hearing board members say is that, OPEB is just one piece, and I want to reiterate that. We continue to talk about it because it's one of the pieces. We're not going to see any budget impact for any changes 5 to 7 years down the road, and that's, again, another reason why it can only be one piece of that, and we do need to look at the full 80%.
Right.
But I know that this one has been a topic on the board's mind for many, many years now, and so, again, coming back to my question is, are we going to do something, or are we just going to say we're leaving it alone and we'll look at something else? So I don't want it to seem that we're only looking at OPEB. This is just one of those lingering topics that we've looked at a lot, and is just, again, one piece, because by making changes to this, it's not going to be impactful to our budget for probably 5 to 7 years down the road.
Abby, thanks for reiterating that. I mean, that was, when we talked about holistic before a couple of months ago, that was really the driving force behind it, is, you look at this, we might need help sooner than 5 years. We almost certainly will. And I think, to me, that's a very strong argument for the holistic approach to this. I am also very conscientious, though, as you say, about this, limiting our scope and staying on a timeline and coming to a conclusion. So it's a juggling act.
Well, we have to be aware of it, and I think there's a way to do both. I do. I mean, and not just in looking at what efficiencies can we make, or what cuts should we make, or whatever, but also the revenue piece, which is another component of this work, which we're doing now, and so that's good too. So it's looking at all of it, at the same time as a board. That's really important. Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle.
Yeah, and I just want to say at last budget development, I think we need, as a board, to think about referendum, and that's there, and that starts to become part of our conversation as well.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on from this, but we will, for the next meeting, have a work session, opportunity to vote on a committee makeup, charge, and those parameters at the next meeting, and we'll work, a small group of us, on advertising it and identifying people in the next 2 weeks. Am I missing anything? Okay. Anyone from the audience who has a comment? Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I don't see anyone, so we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the athletic field proposal, high school athletic field proposal.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Trevor Kolp, principal at Memorial High School, and just asked to kind of come back and revisit what was presented by Kevin and Kim at the couple board meetings ago about the athletic facility proposal at Memorial. There's no real new information in this thing. It's just a review to come back, and if there's questions or what the board plans to do or wants to do moving forward. So there's only a few slides here. The original proposal was the construction of the turf field, the resurfacing of the track, the improvements to the track and field areas, light scoreboard, the main entrance area, and the storage building. You saw the impact on the different areas in the proposal. This is the same aerial view of what it would look like at Memorial, or potentially look at Memorial. These were the funding, different options and ideas that were proposed at the time. Not necessarily, there could be a combination of anything here, I think, whatever the board would look to do if they chose to do this opportunity. This is the only new slide. This is in talking with the donors, that they would have some ability to advertise from their side of it. So this is this is just a sample of maybe what a scoreboard would look like, or on the sides of the entrance into the place, from their $1.2 million donation side of it. So that's just a sample. It's nothing.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. Are you saying that the 1.2 million plus whatever they get from the advertising, or?
No, their 1.2 million would be, their names would go on this spot.
Got it.
So someone might buy the whole bottom row of the scoreboard and put their, so as they're going through theirs. And so then to revisit, just this was the funding options that was talked about when Kevin was up here, and I think Kim helped a little bit with different ways from the district standpoint of looking at ways to potentially project the 1.2 million. But really, that's the piece that I know the board has to struggle with is this the right time? Is it, can we afford it? Should we afford it? I understand all that. But I think it would also behoove us if, when a group comes to us and asks us to potentially bring something forward, that we don't, it's not, I don't think it's my position to say, no, we're not going to at least bring it to the board. So our responsibility is to bring it here. And I think your responsibility then to decide if this is something that is important. I realize it impacts Memorial, but I think it impacts a lot of different things in our district and in our community. But that's something that I think the board has to decide on and understand moving forward. And with any donations, whether it's to Memorial, North, Flynn, Robbins, Mans. So that's the piece that I have. So I don't have a lot more with it. It's more of, I was asked to come back and stand up here and answer your questions, I guess.
Thank you. And good luck. No, I'm just kidding. Board member questions. I have some, but I'll let someone else start if there's questions or comments board members would like to start with. I guess I'll start with this, which is we have a very good guidebook as far as reviewing donations that come in, or suggested donations. And it's from May 2017 when we put together as a board. We were hearing a lot of concerns about inequity particularly between the two high schools, or perceived inequity as far as the donations coming in. And so we put together a equity review committee. And one of those is, of course, their suggestion B, which the board approved all of their suggestions, basically saying, we like these suggestions, we'll make sure to keep them on our radar. So I just want to do that job that the board gave us back then. So the suggestion B is that the district should review all donations given to each school, and comparison should be done to make sure that inequities do not develop over time. And those comparisons should be done on a rolling average. And it says, again, as a committee, we cannot emphasize enough the importance of equity between the donations and keeping detailed records of donations. So that's just our little reminder as a board that equity, as far as when these donations come up and these things are proposed, equity isn't just something that is a good idea for our district. It really is one of our charges as a board now, officially, from having that committee. I agree completely with what Mr. Kolop is saying, which is that's on the part of Memorial especially, they're doing their due diligence by coming to the board with the proposal. Just on its face, that's their role. and it's our role as a board to consider that proposal and to allow them a space and a time to bring it to us. So I understand it's an emotional topic, and it's a difficult topic, but it is our job to assess it and review it and ask the questions, and lucky for you, we get to do all of that in the public. So, but I think it's really important to start it out by looking at those recommendations. The other, I have questions, and if other board members have questions, Commissioner Torres, if you'd like to ask a question, and I'll ask mine. If you have something you'd like to say, Phil?
Yes. A commentary and a question. I think it's exciting and wonderful that people from the community can offer this opportunity to improve facilities for sports. I wish we could have more donations of this kind. I don't think, though, that I would be comfortable supporting the approval of this donation with conditions. I would ask, could these community members make the donation without conditions, so that we can create a fund that could be used in a more comprehensive way, favoring not just Memorial students, but Eau Claire District students, in a way that most students can benefit from it.
I can't answer that for the donor. I mean, I have no problem having that conversation, or putting, Joe or any of you in touch with the donors as a but I can definitely approach them with that.
Well, yeah, and I thank you, Commissioner Torres, for that. I agree with you. I'm assuming that your role here tonight, Mr. Kolop, is kind of to be that liaison, and we'll have minutes from the questions that are asked that we can then share. We are in an interesting position of not knowing who the donors are, and so we're obviously kind of having to relay things back and forth. One of the questions I guess I have, which is less for the donors but more on the district end of things, which would be interesting to get information on. I know that this has been compared to the projects that took place at North High School with the baseball field and other areas. It would be interesting to take a look at that history. I'm not sure, I mean, obviously I was not there when those decisions were made, and I don't think many of us were, but I would be interested to know, when those proposals came through, what percentage of the funding for that came from private sources, such as Booster Club or the Lions Club, and what percentage, if any, came from the district budget. I'd be interested to know that. We need to make sure that we have factual information regarding the comparison of the facilities between North and Memorial and their athletic facilities. Because if you look objectively at this topic, they're kind of apples and oranges. There are obviously things at Memorial that are not at the same level as North's, we know that, but I'm curious if we could determine, regardless of this proposal, setting that aside, if that was not necessarily painting the picture, I'd be curious if we could determine what improvements have been identified by Buildings and Grounds as necessary or needed over at Memorial in these areas, and what the cost out of those would be. Because of course it would be helpful to make a decision like this, knowing what parts of it would fit within that structure of our capital improvement planning. I'm not sure where that fits, and it would be good to know that. The other piece that I think would be maybe good, Mr. Kolop, to bring back to the donors, because I'm not aware of this, but I'd be interested to know what kinds of discussions took place with Carson Park, Parks and Recreation, the city, or the university regarding future complex plans, athletic facility plans, and potential areas for collaboration. obviously we're in a time with limited resources, as all of our entities are, and so looking at identifying those public-private partnerships, you know, the other aspect of that, of course, is Eau Claire has some major you know, if you're looking at the $1.2 million that the district would have to come up for this kind of a thing, and the advertising, of course, soliciting community buy-in. We're in the midst of a lot that's going on right now in the news. You know, the Confluence Project is still raising money. Soon the library is launching their capital campaign. And then after that, the Sonnentag complex is coming. So, you know, that's a huge aspect of this, is where would this sit within all of that? And could it be a partner, or would it be? But, you know, there's clearly a very emotional public response to this topic when it hits the headlines because of the North versus Memorial thing, and because of that image that's put out there, whether that's right or wrong, whether justified or not. Of course, I am only going to be positive from the outset about wanting to have a conversation with someone about additional partnerships or additional revenue. That's my job, and that's our job, is to be positive about those things and be positive in the pursuit of facts and information that can help us make a decision. But one piece that I can't help but wonder is and it's past the date now, but you know, the board had very limited to no involvement in the planning of this. And I'm not sure how the planning of it, how long it was. I don't know if it was a year-long conversation with these folks. I don't know if it was 6 months, but it was brought to us kind of at the end of this process of planning, when you know, you have people up at this board with a variety of connections and experiences that can help enhance planning of a project from the get-go, and we can help connect with others. So that's one piece that of course, hindsight's 20/20, but that's something that would be interested. I'd be interested to know kind of where they were at with that decision of not involving us necessarily early on. I'd be curious to know, this is one thing to maybe our staff could know, is if this project does not include seating. I don't know if it does or doesn't. I don't think it does, from what I'm looking. So if it doesn't include seating, what savings would really be realized? Because I know that savings were presented at the last meeting, and I will be the first to be excited when someone says savings to us. But if savings are not, if seating is not there, then in what ways would this really replace Carson Park sometimes? So that's another aspect of it that I think we would just have to work through, is the net savings that we would see as a district without having the seating there. That would be interesting to know. And the other piece, of course, is the appearance, I think, from the beginning, whether right or wrong, that this kind of was a project that already kind of had its developer in mind. And maybe that wasn't the case, and this was just a developer that was very helpful in the process, and they were willing to donate time to design and that kind of thing. But of course, as folks know, if we would even front $1 towards this project, that needs to be a public process. There would have to be an RFP involved. So it would only be proper to really have a pre-established developer partnership if and only if there was no expectation of dollars from the district end of things. So those are some of my kind of questions right now that I have, but I'd be interested if other board members have questions. Yes, Commissioner Harder.
Well, first, I too want to thank these anonymous donors for bringing this offer forward. I mean, and attempting to partner with the district, albeit it's a little unorthodox, but we'll take anything, as far as I'm concerned, as a proposal and a suggestion. And I want to echo some things already said here, but just the value of the community engagement and just the generosity of this amount, this dollar figure, is all really great stuff. But when we talk about a $1.2 million gift, if it were just a gift without any stipulations or strings, that in and of itself would raise significant equity questions, but once we add in the district matching stipulation, I think the equity issues become unavoidably consequential, and we need time to study those and to step through them. I'm wondering, do we have thoughts, have there been, I would assume it would be on the slide if there was a lot of material in this regard, but possible revenue opportunities that can help offset these numbers, the district costs, and I know I would expect they would extend years into the future before we might see any kind of return, but has there been any work in that?
Well, there has been some work, because there was some of that stuff that we sent to you folks, so I'm not sure where that is. When all the questions were asked after the first presentation.
Right.
Right, so some of the revenue generating ideas are listed here, and options of how to fund that 1.2. The biggest one obviously was advertising, and we did bring the advertising policy back to policy and governance 2 weeks ago, I think, right? And so there was a couple more points of clarification and potentially some policy changes that we were working through. But there is a naming rights policy already in place that the board obviously has the final decision. It's all laid out. We haven't utilized it in the past because I don't think we've had the opportunity. So that is already there, but to project, we don't really know for sure what we could get. And then if we use the scoreboards at Northwood Memorial, for example, the anchor partners we did a 5-year partnership with. And then the, what's the, not the anchor partners, but what's the level down? Premier, thank you. The Premier partners, they also have a contract, but their timeline is shorter, obviously, because the advertising looks different. And so I think we have a format for that. It's just, is that format a good model for this type of an opportunity? And I think it certainly could be. We just didn't go into a lot of detail because we were waiting for some board information as to what does that look like. Because we could spend a lot of time and energy and money as well to what does that look like, and then not have it go. So we have some ideas, but we haven't vetted them all the way through with.
And there's some little, you're right, there's some of them that add up, some are little,
Right.
some are bigger. I mean, the ability to rent the facility, to host facility activities. Some of our teams wouldn't necessarily have to travel, teams would travel to ours, so the busing costs. I'll use soccer for an example. We travel to Madison, we travel to Appleton, and we travel, or now maybe we get them to come to us, and that's one less travel each year, so that's busing every year, that 2 or 3. So those are small pieces that up to, they don't get to 1.2 million, I get that.
Right.
But those are different things that on top of the advertising, the renewal of the advertising after whatever time period is, similar to the scoreboard is a very good example, is after a certain time period, those become, renewable, and then that's where you continue to either raise revenue or offset costs for other things.
So yeah, thank you. And we've got the 1.2 million that's sort of out there as numbers and that are clear, but what we don't have is projection of sort of costs and revenue opportunities beyond those numbers. And I understand that's work, and when and if we even spend time to do that work, I would say any group looking to successfully put a proposal forward, the more of that we can do in our financial situation right now, in terms of making the financial case for it, and why it's maybe there's a break-even point in 10 years that can help. Okay, well, maybe. I'm not seeing any of that right now. It makes it especially hard, setting aside the equity questions. It makes it especially hard to really embrace this.
Thank you, Commissioner Harder. I can't help but feel at this stage in the game that it would be really helpful to try to have the conversation with the individuals involved, or a representative of them, or at least somebody, not in this setting, but in a just like a meeting, scheduling a time to just discuss with them their motivations and their thoughts and the ideas that they have, because I honestly feel like there is something here that we should that we should at least discuss, and to just write off someone who wants to, a group of people who want to give the district over $1 million, even if there is a stipulation attached with the current idea, to write that off would not be a prudent use of the public trust, nor would it be to just simply move forward with something like this. So I kind of feel like it's really important to have that conversation, or at least try to. So, I mean, whether that's me and Dr. Hardebeck and attempting to meet with an individual or a couple of them, I would feel that would be a good, kind of a necessary next step, because otherwise we're going to kind of be playing the game of telephone a little bit, and I don't want to put you in that place, Mr. Kolop, or Mr. Thompson, or anyone else. I think it will be good to have the direct communication.
I think they'd be open to that.
So that would
For
be,
sure.
I don't know how board members feel about just having that conversation. A lot of these ideas and questions that we have, it would really be as simple as just sitting down, seeing is the compatibility there? You know, is there maybe a broader way that we could look at this, or is there just having that conversation? Because until we've had that conversation, I kind of feel like this is we'll just kind of sit here as it is right now. Yeah, Ms. Cole.
Can I ask, just a clarifying question? The questions that you asked earlier, did you want answers tonight, or was that just a brainstorm list of questions? I know Mr. Kolop has some comparison information regarding the facilities and the differences between the facilities. Do you want that information tonight, or would you like that information in a different way?
Maybe if it could just be put in the Friday letter. I think that would be good for us to know as far as, because that's been brought up about the facility comparison, and I would like to get the facility comparison without it being colored by this, just on its own, just on its own 2 feet, what the comparison is. That would be good to, at least for the board to be aware of, whether they do something with that or not, just to have that information at our fingertips. But yeah, as far as next steps, I think it would be important to at least just try to have that conversation. So, because these kinds of things are all about the relationship and that communication. So, and we can't have a relationship if we haven't met. So, that's kind of where I'm at with it. But I don't know how other board members feel. If you feel like that, yeah, Commissioner Bika and then Commissioner Hambuck will.
Thank you for coming tonight. I really want to support your idea of getting people together to meet. I think the donation, it's an incredible gift. It's possibly a once in a lifetime, kind of experience. And to think about the sort of legacy that these donors could potentially leave for physical education for all children in the district is incredible, as Eau Claire is a destination district for physical education, broadly speaking. I think it's limitless possibilities.
Yes.
And so I really hope that they'll work with us.
Commissioner Hambuck will.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I mean, several of the questions Joe brought up, I had down here as well. I just would like, as a board member, to see the 5-year capital plan relative to Memorial and what we had planned to do over time, because I know that was out there, and I know that there were things that were going to be done. I'd like to place that within the context as well. And thanks, Mr. Kolop.
Yep. Thank you. Commissioner Torres.
Finally, I would like for that conversation to happen with the full board.
If the conversation happens with the full board, it will be a public meeting, and that's just a consideration we need to have, because I don't know if the individuals who are interested in this are ready at this point to be public, and so that's the only reason why I would suggest not an actual government meeting and more an informal meeting, a discussion like we would do with other donors who would contact us. I'm interested in such and such fund, I'm interested in supporting something, where we would have a meeting, but not with the entire board.
I disagree.
That's fine. Are board members, other board members okay with just having a subset meet?
Something you probably want to also consider is involving the Eau Claire Schools Foundation.
Yes.
Because that really is their place, you know,
Right.
for the district, and that's one of my responsibilities as a board member, is sitting on their governing board, and so working with donors, that would be a perfect, really perfect fit.
Right. Yeah, I agree, and actually, Commissioner Bika, that's a good point, because it's in this equity committee suggestions that we work really closely with the foundation as the entity for that. So Commissioner Beaker, would you be okay with having a small group meeting of, you know, whether me or with the superintendent and others?
I understand, I know very little about this project. All I know is
Right.
what's been presented in public forum.
Right.
And so I don't really know the status of the donors, or
Right.
what would necessitate a different type of forum. I always think a public forum is best.
Right.
But if that ideal isn't possible right now, whatever kind of gets the conversation moving toward that public forum in the end.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think best case scenario, we would have had, they would come and speak with us at the meeting. I think I'm just trying to work with where they're coming from and figure out what, you know, if they're not comfortable with speaking in the context of a board meeting, if they would meet in a more private way, and that's okay to do. So I'm just trying to feel that out, just having that as an option for us at the very least. Other board member comments, questions? Commissioner Harder?
Yeah, I'd be in favor of engagement, and it's kind of on their terms, I think.
Right.
If we can get them to do public, I certainly would prefer that. If not, then I would be in favor of something more private.
Yeah, so that's what I'm hearing public is the preference, but if that, and we'll invite public first. We'll invite it as a public discussion first, and then if that's not really the preference, then we'll do something private first. Is that Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment too. We've worked really hard as a board for several years now on the equity piece, and on really involving our community on our committees and having input and being open and transparent that way. Truly, when we had all the boundary meetings and things like that, we talked about one district, that we really want to portray that and try to send that message. I think this opportunity that they've offered is amazing, as Dr. Bika said, but I really think that our culture relative to equity and how strongly we feel about that has to be taken into the conversation however they want to do that. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Vu?
I have similar thinking, but the one thing I do want to add to what we all said is that whoever's considering this donation needs to know straightforward from us that we do appreciate their consideration, their kindness of stepping in to help the community. It's very appreciated of. However, we are in a budget crunch and we don't know how we will go along with all those possible options, which in my opinion, none of them are things that we can take on as a board. But whoever is considering making the donation need to know that. So the second point I want to make is that perhaps not to close the door, but keep the door open for the whole district in terms of athletic support. If the donor is not flexible about no condition attached. If the option isn't open for no condition, then perhaps reprioritize the capital plan for now until when it's ready. So don't lock into 1 or 2 years to get this project done. So meeting with this donor, you accomplish two things. A, be upfront.
Right.
And then ask for suggestion on how we can still use their help, but not in the manner that we will break our back doing it.
Thank you. Okay. Student representatives, any other board member comments? Commissioner Torres?
No.
Oh. Any others? Yeah.
I agree with Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle on this one. I've heard from students from both high schools. I've heard a lot of worry about creating that larger divide that already exists between the high schools, especially along with test scores. And I know that even as a board, we closed open enrollment for Memorial in 2017 because students and parents prefer to go to Memorial over North. And I think that's devastating just in general, but I would really hope that we could hear more from the community, maybe after we meet with these donors that we aren't aware of. I'd like to have as much community involvement and opinion as possible on this.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, any other board member questions or comments at this time? Okay, so we'll follow up on that and bring what we can to the board later on. Anyone in the audience have a question or comment? Okay, you can come right up to the podium and just state your name and address, please.
I have kept my coat on the whole 4 hours, 3 hours. My name is Lynette Hesse. I live at E3200 Aspen Road. I am excited to talk about the equity of this because I've served on equity committees, and you might recognize me because I think I presented 2 times ago. But there are a couple things I wanted to point out. One is the precedent of this gift. It's tough. I think if I would have chose, maybe I would have picked behavioral health, maybe I would have picked nutrition. Maybe we can't look a gift horse in the mouth. But secondly, I really want to talk about the equity piece because I want you to look at this aspect of it. Memorial is the only school in athletic conferences. I challenge you to come up with anybody in the county. We are the only place that does not have a restroom accessible. We do not have accessible restroom at our outdoor facilities, period. And I'm really concerned that in the future this is becoming a safety issue. So when North redid their track, they did a really nice concession and outdoor restroom. Every student that takes PE, is that what you guys call it now? At both schools use the outdoor facilities. And then on weekend and after hours events, I'm a safety officer. I wish you would have stayed. I would have talked to her. I'm a safety officer for a different organization. But we let people then, their only bathroom, running water, ADA acceptable option is to go in our school after hours. And I know that's going to become a safety factor. So I just want to bring those 2 things up. The only other thing money-wise, I know when Menominee did this project in 2016, their board asked Markin & Johnson to donate their general contracting service fees. Durand did a project in 2017. So there are different options where I can see as a board, we don't necessarily have to take that money out of our budget. We just have to match that money, whether that's by further donations or not. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the audience at this time? Okay, so seeing none, we will move on to our next agenda item. And thank you very much, Mr. Kolep, for joining us this evening. And that will take us then to our discussion and possible first reading of new policy 453.12, concussion and brain injury management. So while Secretary Everson is pulling it up, this topic is very important and something that more and more school districts are paying attention to. So for this particular policy, which is a new policy, we consulted our staff, school nurses, as well as a concussion consultant and representative from the Wisconsin Brain Injury Alliance. So I don't know if board members, why don't we do a first reading? And Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle, would you like to do the first reading?
Sure.
Okay.
Policy 400, concussion and brain injury management, being revised. Last reviewed December 17, 2018. The Eau Claire Area School District recognizes the severity of concussions and shall work with families and their medical providers to support students with concussions transition back to school. Information regarding concussions shall be shared with families on the district website and as needed for special school-supported activities. A concussion is a type of traumatic brain injury. Concussions occur when there is a forceful blow to the head or body that results in rapid movement of the head and causes any change in behavior, thinking, or physical functioning. Concussions are not limited to situations involving loss of consciousness. Some symptoms of a concussion include headache, nausea, confusion, memory difficulties, dizziness, blurred vision, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, and difficulty sleeping. Support services for students with concussions shall be coordinated by a team that may include the student, family, school staff, and the student's medical provider. Parents who inform coaches and teachers that their child is being treated by a healthcare professional for a concussion must provide written clearance from the healthcare professional for full or limited participation in class, practice, activity, or competition. Prior to receiving written clearance from a healthcare professional, students who have sustained a concussion may have limited participation in school-related physical activities. School athletic programs and student athletes shall follow the WIAA return to play recommendations or a licensed medical provider's accommodations for the student athlete who has a sustained or suspected concussion. I like the link. Is that the link's going to be on the?
Yes, yes. Okay, so are there any board member questions on this policy? Okay.
The wording, work with families and their medical providers to support students with concussions to transition back to school? Is that worded the way it's supposed to be? And I'm just reading it funny?
I was
Yeah.
thinking with concussions in the transition
Yeah,
back to
okay, so
school.
When I read it, it just sounded funny.
I agree.
Why don't we just say, instead of transition, say who are transitioning back to school? Okay, is that fine if we make that one modification? Okay. Anyone from the audience have a comment on this one? And just state your name and address, please.
My name is Karen Wortman, and I'm a speech-language pathologist, so I deal with concussions every day. I live at 5997 Hillside Park Road. One of my concerns I have with your policy is your wording of a healthcare professional. I'm also a mother of an athlete. I've known many athletes to have concussions. A healthcare professional can be anybody from an athletic trainer, to a nurse practitioner, to a physician's assistant, to a neurologist, to a pediatrician. Not all of those healthcare professionals are trained in concussion management. I think that parents, students, and healthcare professionals are very savvy in our current culture. They want the child to return to playing sports. They don't necessarily understand the impact of a concussion. As a speech-language pathologist, I understand the impact of concussion. I also know that there is a very subjective range of what a concussion is in regards to an athletic trainer's ability to diagnose a concussion, to a student's awareness of whether this is their second, third, or fourth concussion and whether they can continue to play. I think it would be advised to the board to maybe specify a little bit clearer what a healthcare professional is, because it is a very up-and-coming issue in our district. I have seen a grave variation between women and male athletic participants. I've seen a hockey player get checked into the boards and sustain a concussion and wave off the athletic trainer. I've seen a volleyball player get a ball to the face and she can't play for 5 games. It is solely up to the coach to decide whether a concussion has been sustained and whether the athletic trainer is trained in concussion management. There are protocols on the WIAA sports page. There is a lot of information out there. Some of it is valid, some of it is not. One of the things that I see also as a concern to the board is that sometimes it is difficult to get into a provider for your child to get waived for concussion management. Sometimes a provider can't see your child for 3 weeks, while as a mom of an athlete, 3 weeks can be an eternity, especially one that's looking at a collegiate scholarship. I think the board should look a little bit closer at the healthcare professional component of this policy. And that's all I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not sure, I know that the rules, the administrative rules of this, I believe they specify healthcare professional.
Yeah, I'd like to have Kai-Ying Zhang come up and just give you a little background. That whole discussion about healthcare professional and actually the role for athletics was discussed by the team that put this together.
Okay, thank you. That would be helpful.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions. When we looked at this policy with our school nurses, one of the pieces that we try to keep in mind is that the policy be comprehensive from the perspective of this policy does not talk only about athletic injuries, it's concussions in general. So the student who trips and falls down the stairs, the student that has a car accident. And so again, being comprehensive and thinking about the healthcare abilities of all of our families. So not all of our families enjoy the same level of health care as perhaps the child sitting next to them. And I think that by really defining who that healthcare professional is, we may be defining the ability of certain students and families to get the health care that they need, which is why we left the policy as general as it was. Other questions?
So there isn't currently a specification of what we mean by healthcare professional in the rules?
There is not. Even in the rules, we continue to say healthcare professionals, again, understanding that we would rather have students and families get some type of support versus no support at all from the healthcare professions.
So,
yeah.
The concern is if you get too specific in the type of healthcare professional qualifications or specialization, that they may just not go at all.
Correct, because certain families don't have that level of coverage or the ability to see a specialist in that arena.
Sure.
Okay. So, I mean, the policy itself can be adopted by the board at the next meeting, and perhaps with the rules, we could just maybe double check with our concussion consultant about if there should be something more there, or if that should be how it's. I get what you're saying, though. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience have a comment or question? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move that then for adoption at the next meeting. And then, let's see, we have, the next item is discussion and possible first reading of policy 164, school board member accommodations, compensation, expenses, and equipment. So with the changes in the handbook, this basically reflects those changes. They're really about modernizing our language to best meet the needs of board members. It includes a new $20 a month stipend for child care expenses for board members with children, and it includes the ability for board members to be issued a laptop and or mobile device for district use if they don't have their own or they need one, and keeping records of board expenditures while traveling. The other thing that it does is it removes the per diem that board members were slated to receive of $15 for travel, for every day during travel, because we came to the conclusion that that was really not cost efficient for our district payroll to process. It costs more to process it than the actual per diem, really. So that's really the only changes here. So I will just read these briefly. They're very quick changes. So members of the school board shall be paid a salary of $2,000 per year, with the president paid $2,500. Any change in salary goes into effect upon re-election of incumbents or election of new school board members. An in-district car allowance of $30 per month is authorized for board members. Upon request, a monthly child care stipend of $20 per month may be provided towards the cost of board member child care arrangements during regular board meetings. Out-of-district expenses as authorized by the school board shall be paid using a district purchasing card or be reimbursed as follows. Then going down below, board members shall keep a record of their expenditures and submit receipts to the board secretary for the costs of their travel. Expenses for national conferences shall not be reimbursed for school board members who have filed a declaration of non-candidacy. Board members shall be issued a laptop, computer, and or mobile device for district use if they so choose or do not have a device of their own. So are there any board member comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner Halbach.
I do have one. I don't know if this goes in here. Because people don't know this, or people would go to the policy maybe if they were running for school board, but if you're a former employee, you cannot be paid. So I don't know, you put a thing in there as far as if you're a non-candidate, you don't get to, would it be if, you know what I'm saying? And I think that should be out front and center, because, or maybe in the handbook or something, but
what would
mean,
you
if
suggest as like a sentence? At the top section about the board member salary?
Maybe.
So you're saying there should be a section there just stipulating that retired E ECASD staff members who serve on the board are not eligible for,
For the salary. or
due to
the-
their retirement.
Yeah.
Is there,
But
Ms.
it's-
Johnson or Ms. Marks, and is there a suggestion or comment on that?
Yeah, it's not that it's not an option, it's just that you have a choice to make. So I don't know necessarily how you would want to word that, because basically you can choose to have access to your HRA, or you can choose to take the salary. You can't have both at the same time. So,
I mean, the other option, of course, not everything has to be in policy. This is perhaps something that, I know in your case, Commissioner Humbuck, there wasn't necessarily the education provided for you as a new board member, or the communication regarding that, because I believe you were the first retiree to be on the board in a long time, or ever, I'm not sure. I'm sure there were others, but you were the first in kind of a modern time. So perhaps this is just something that we make sure that the payroll office is aware, and they have some sort of sample language that they have, and that if a retiree gets on the board, they have that on the books.
so our process is that each retiree in the retirement packet, there is a form that describes, it's called rehired annuitant, and there's a whole page that's in there. And so anytime that HR works with somebody that's considering coming back to work, or payroll works with that, they're provided that information when they retire. In their retirement packet, it's also presented again if they're considering coming back to work.
So there's maybe just as simple as adding to that, being on the school board? Is that what you're saying? Because that's about rehire if you're coming back to the
Right.
workforce. But perhaps putting something, maybe one sentence in there about if they opt in the future to run
Yeah.
for the board.
I
Maybe
mean,
that's as simple as
We
that.
might be able to modify that.
Because we went through the whole thing about if you run as a, as a candidate, and you put yourself out there. I didn't necessarily look at myself as an employee, but you are.
You are?
Yeah, see,
Correct.
and I think that's kind of the understanding people need to have.
Okay.
It's no big deal, but I think people should know that from the get-go.
I mean, if it's put in that notice, that would probably make the most sense, and might even serve as, in an informal way, a way that retirees know that they can run for school board if they so choose. So it's also educating them about that. So that's interesting too. So, okay. So any board member comments or questions on this policy revision?
I do.
Yeah, Commissioner Torres.
I have two. On the paragraph that says expenses for national conferences shall not be reimbursed for school board members who have filed a declaration of non-candidacy. I know this is old text, and that the words changed are shall and school board for Board of Education.
Right.
So I'm trying to understand the rationale behind this, because a board member is a board member until the last day of his or her term. And if we are saying that because someone has declared non-candidacy, does that curtail his or her privileges to?
I can explain it. It's the reasoning is because so if someone has declared non-candidacy, that means that in that May, the following May, they will be off the board. The national conference is generally in April. So the expense of a national conference is thousands of dollars, because you have the airfare, the hotels, and the convention fee. So the reason why they put that in place is because you don't want to have someone who's not going to be on the board within 30 days who is getting all this additional training and stuff for a board member at the cost of, whether it's $5,000 or whatever, and then be off. I think that's the reason why that's been.
But what about other national conferences that are not in May?
That's the only one that I think we've approved for the board members that I'm aware of, at least in recent history, as far as a national conference where a board member is going on at the district's expense. I can only think of the National School Board, the National Education Conference. So perhaps you could, it could say expenses for the National Education Conference shall not be, but ultimately that's the only national conference that the board has, that board members go to. That's included in our board budget.
Okay, I didn't know that piece.
So that's really the only reasoning for that.
Yeah, because it could be, discriminatory if that national conference takes place at another time in the year.
Yeah. Well, logistically, the declaration of non-candidacy, when is that signed?
December.
Okay. So December is the declaration of non-candidacy. May is the end of board service. So you have January, February, March, April. So it's in those 4 months basically that there's kind of they're going to be off the board. So and the only national conference I know of is April. So there's January, February, March. I'm not aware though of board members ever going on a different national conference. I don't. And Secretary Iverson, you've been here for maybe 5 or 6 years. 5 or 6 years for the record.
Be careful.
So you could tell us if I don't know if board members, I think by national conference, they mean the National School Board Conference, which is always the month before a new board.
Perhaps it's just a wording then, something like.
Yeah, that's fine.
Reimbursements will not proceed after a board member has declared non-candidacy.
You just mean saying, instead of national conferences, saying expenses for the National Education Conference?
Correct. Well,
Okay.
conferences that happen after declaring non-candidacy. So it could be any conference that happens, any national conference that happens after declaring non-candidacy.
So instead of who have filed, saying after filing a shall not be available for board members, school board members after filing a declaration? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah.
Is that
So
fine
it's
with
more
board
generic.
members?
Mhm.
Is that fine with board members? Just saying, after you filed it, which is in December, there is no, that's fine, okay. Well, yeah, it's just making it clear and more user-friendly, so that's good. Okay.
And then the other one is the last part, which is all red, so that means it's all new, right?
Yes.
Board members shall be issued a laptop, computer, and/or mobile device for district use if they so choose or do not have a device of their own. I don't feel comfortable with that. That's expense for the district.
I think the rationale behind it was if we have board members, I know we have several board members who are currently issued a laptop. This is just reflecting current practice.
Yeah, that's fine. If they are available, that's fine, but,
Yeah.
Making mandatory, and then the computers, I understand, we have a lot of those.
Yeah.
But mobile devices,
Well, I think that the idea behind that was if you're serving on the board, you are pretty much entirely online. There's very little paper that we deal with, so just making sure that we have devices and access, and it kind of with the goal of it making sure that, also kind of the concept of the childcare piece, making sure that board service is accessible for as many people as it can be, because board service is already it's very cost prohibitive to serve on a local school board or in local office, so making sure that we're accommodating people. I think that was the...
shouldn't the laptop suffice for that, communication-wise?
You're saying you don't want to put mobile device on there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've never had a board member who's asked for a phone to use. But,
Because with the
oh,
phone
who did we
comes-
have asked for a phone?
Had that with the president of the school board.
Oh, a couple presidents ago. Oh, and we accommodated it? Now, is it that because that person did not have their own phone, or they wanted to keep the separation?
They want to keep the separation.
Which I understand that. So, I mean, I think it's okay to leave it because it will totally be a case-by-case situation. But I'm open to other ideas people have. I think the goal of it, so, for example, the city council pays a telephone stipend. They have an additional telephone stipend. We do not have that. But what we do have is if there's a device available, because we check out iPhones to certain positions, we check out laptops to certain positions. So if they're available, that they could be checked
Yeah,
out.
that's fine, that's what we do now.
Right, so that's all that's saying.
And it says shall.
So you want to change it to may be issued?
Maybe.
Is everyone,
Maybe would be more appropriate.
okay. Is everyone okay with changing it to may instead of shall? Okay. So with those two changes, any other thing else from the board? We can put that on our agenda. Anyone from the audience have a comment on this policy or question? Okay. Seeing none then, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Vu.
It's not a request for change, but I think it's interesting to point out that the 2000 compensation was decided in 2003. And economy went up since then. But we are so passionate about this kind of work that we didn't bother to ask for the raise.
I want a raise.
We're so charitable. Yeah,
Do you want to bring it down?
No, I just want to point out.
1,500.
Not that I didn't see
Do I
it,
hear
I see it.
1,500?
Going once? Well, I was not going to be the board president to bring up raises for board members. But if someone else would like to have that be the hill to die on, that's fine. Okay. All right, so we will move on from that. We're going to move on from this policy before we do anything dangerous. Our final agenda item of the night is Policy 823, which is access to public records. So I'll just read each change. They're very brief. If we could zoom in. Okay. So these changes are making them more grammatically correct, if I'm right here, kind of cleaning them up. Okay. So changing the word material to materials and changing is to are, so we can scroll down. Okay. And then because of the requirement by law, and then nor does any person requesting access to the records of the district need to state any reason for his or her request. Okay? And then this part is changing the language from executive sessions to closed sessions, because that's what we refer to them as in our district, as closed sessions, and referencing the different rule 347 in a different place to make it more correct. Okay? This is a change of the titles. So Executive Director of Administration, Executive Director of Business Services, Executive Director of Human Resources, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Building Principals, Director of Academic Services, Director of Assessment, Director of Early Learning, Director of Student Services, Director of Special Education, Director of Technology, Director of Buildings and Grounds, Director of Food and Nutrition, and members of the school board. This part modifies the local public official personnel records. The following local public official personnel records shall not be subject to release unless the local public official authorizes providing access to such information. 1. Home address, home electronic mail address, home telephone number, or social security number. This does not apply to information that can be requested through a State of Wisconsin campaign finance registration statement. School board members may be reached through their official ECASD.us email account, the Email the Board form on the ECASD website, or by mailing board members at 500 Main Street, Eau Claire, WI. School board members may also be reached by phone by contacting the school board secretary, who will relay the request for the phone call to the school board member. And I believe that's the only other change. It's just saying this is the only other changes. Saturdays, Sundays, and district holidays are excluded from the time periods as far as the records request. So, are there any questions regarding that? Yes, Commissioner Harder.
Yeah, I
and then
do. About
Commissioner Torres.
the contact information on the website, my understanding is I'd heard something that the email addresses had been removed, our district email addresses had been removed from the, is that true?
I'm not sure how it's listed right now, but once this change is put into effect, the default is that on the board page where it shows board members, their district email will be listed as their contact, their primary contact.
Yeah.
If a board member wishes to add a phone number or something like that, a personal phone number, they can do so. But the default will be that it will just be the email address, the ECASD.us email address.
I noticed my email address is not listed at the moment. It's just the form. But,
so that would be the change, is that instead of your phone number and your home address,
got it.
It'll just list your email now.
That's great.
That page right there. Which you can see what
It
it'll
actually
look
goes
like.
to it goes to the form, not to, it's not my actual email address. It's different. It's, I would
It goes
prefer to
directly
see the actual email address there, as it is in President Luganbill's entry.
So that's what so that's what I think that the change will actually look like, is if you go back and you go to the page, the way it lists next to my name, it shows my email. But you'll see that I took my address off and I took my phone number off.
No, I'll be changed to that format.
Yes.
I think that's good.
So they'll all be
Yeah.
changed to that. Yep. Okay. Are there other board member comments or questions on this? Okay, seeing none, anyone in the audience have a comment or question? Okay, so that concludes our items for this evening. Are there any requests for future agenda items? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So,
Is there a second?
second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the Eau Claire Area School Board. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.